Hey, Andrew.
Yes, Steven?
You know how we romanticize the days of going out to our local video store and sifting through endless amounts of movies, searching for our favorite films, and maybe even finding some hidden gems?
Oh yes, I know it all too well. That used to be my favorite thing to do. Unfortunately, everything is online now.
Well, what if I told you that there was a place online where you could get some of them same thrills as going to the video store?
Are you talking about Orbit DVD?
I knew you knew what I was talking about. Orbit DVD is located in Asheville, North Carolina, and online with OrbitDVD.com, they bring you everything your physical media heart desires.
Yeah, they have an awesome website that stays up to date with the latest releases from all of your favorite boutique labels as well as studio releases. Not only do they carry American labels such as Criterion Collection, Severin Films, Vinegar Syndrome, and Warner Archive, but they get routine shipments on imports from companies such as 88 Films, Arrow Video, Imprint, and so much more.
And with the option to sell or trade your used copies for cash or store credit, they really bring that video store vibe to you. So go to OrbitDVD.com and stock up on your Blu-rays.
And tell them Chasing Labels sent you.
Welcome to another episode of Chasing Labels. I'm your host, Stephen Billings, and as always with me is my other host, Andrew Cabral. How you doing, man?
Doing good. As they say, I am a co-host of...
Yeah, I should say co-hosts. I'm your co-host, and then he's your... I don't know why I do that on it. I just
either way, it gets it gets through.
Yeah.
But this is another episode of Chasing Labels, and this is episode 53.
Yep.
If memory serves correctly.
We're getting there, man.
So, yeah, we're getting ever close to the century mark, I guess.
Yeah.
Who knows of what we'll do when we get there?
I don't know
Maybe
what we'll do. We'll do
Who
something
knows?
special. We'll throw a party. But as usual, we have another guest for you to delve into his background. He is the director of the Indigenous program at Sundance Film Institute. He's got a lot of other things in his background we'll get into, and that's Mr. Adam Piron. How you doing, man?
Great. Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, and so you're coming out of California right now, right?
Yeah. I'm based just a little bit outside of LA.
Okay.
But yeah, Southern California.
That's good. So please, before we get into your work, we would love to get into your background as a film fan. So please tell us about your beginnings. You know, where you grew up, where film got introduced to you.
Yeah. I want to say for up until when I was about 7, because of my dad's job, we used to move around a lot. So I was actually born in South Carolina. Then we moved to San Antonio in Texas, and then to Alaska for a little bit, and then ended up in Phoenix, which is primarily where I grew up. But I think really early on, I think I had like a lot, I think looking back on it, it's like a lot of my like sort of obsessive film tendencies really sort of came out at a young age. Like I know there's a story that my parents tell where and I think it was also the first film I saw in the theater, but like I guess I was really into like 2 films when I was like 2 and 3, where it was like The Jungle Book, the old Disney film, and then The Wizard of Oz. And I think like story was, at least with The Wizard of Oz, was that which I think also too, that was like a thing in my family. Like my mom's side really loved the film, and I guess I used to watch it like obsessively every day as like a toddler, to the point that one time the tape broke and I kind of just threw a fit until they went and had to go buy another copy. and that sort of like pacified me. But I think like, and then there was The Jungle Book. I think that was, I did some research on it too, because I was like, I remembered, I have vague memories of seeing it in a theater when I was like, I think 3. And I went back and checked it out. And I think it was like one of those things where Disney like re-released it into theaters. I think in 89 or 1990. So that was like my first sort of theatrical going experience. And I think, fairly typical sort of 90s kid cinephilia in terms of how that sort of started. Like I was really into Star Wars growing up. That was kind of like my next obsession. I think it was just sort of like the world at the time, and this was sort of like pre special edition and everything.
Yeah.
But I think that it was also sort of like, um, I remember when the prequels came out, because I want to say, I think I was around 11 or 12 or something like that. Um, but I mean, I had a fairly standard taste for a kid, I guess you could say, and I think it was around when episode one came out, like I was like trying to watch the other movies that the other actors were in, so um, it sort of opened up, and also too, I think like with Star Wars kind of being a thing, I started watching like the films that inspired George Lucas for that. So things like Hidden Fortress, a lot of the Kurosawa films, which that was like sort of a first for me. And then also, like stuff that was by some of the actors that were in the film. So like Samuel L. Jackson, obviously that kind of like led to
Yeah.
Tarantino right away.
And then, of course,
I think,
some of the actors they introduce in the prequels, like having like Christopher Lee in there.
oh, totally,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I think also, like Ewan McGregor, that was sort of like an early thing for me into like, cinema from the UK. Like I remember seeing Train Spotting, definitely at probably an age that I was too young to see that film. But it was just, and then like also like Natalie Portman with the Professional, and like Luc Besson, and like a lot of that. So I think it was just sort of like, I mean, it's weird to say, I mean, like that, I guess in some weird way that like, embarrassing to say, I guess, like the Phantom Menace was kind of this weird sort of like door that opened up all this other stuff
Well,
for me. Yeah.
it's
And
not.
I mean, especially being that age too, I guess. So.
That's a great thing, though. I mean, having that kind of investigative mind, even for that, is something I wish I could hear more people say. Instead of just watching the movie and then saying, "Oh, I liked it," that's it. That's they if they liked it, well, look into it more. Like
Totally,
look into
yeah.
the actors, look into the people that make the movie, the score, like. I'm not saying you have to become like a super film nerd, but I'm just saying like you can discover so much just from paying attention to everybody in one movie.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like another thing also too, which, my dad, like my mom's Native American and my dad's, from France. So I think also growing up, I sort of had like this into French film, but it was also like not from kind of, I think what Americans think of as the more kind of classic thing. It was a lot of like, a lot of these sort of like dumb French comedies that like, just lay people go see. Like, I mean, it's not like people are watching like Godard or Truffaut just regularly over there.
I think people
yeah.
assume that for some reason,
Yeah, no, it is. So it's really funny that like, so like for me, it was just like, yeah, like, I knew about like Jean-Paul Belmondo, but like totally outside of like the French New Wave, just him being in these weird sort of goofy comedies and stuff. And so, yeah, like I think, and my dad, I was actually just talking to someone this morning about this, but my dad ended up moving to Southeast Asia, so I'd go visit him a lot, and you know, I guess I don't know if I'm incriminating myself here, but like a big thing there is like it's just part of kind of like I think the way that people engage with film over there. Like there's a lot of like just piracy at markets and stuff like that. So I a huge part of my film education was just sort of going to these like night markets and picking up these like burned DVDs or like these bootleg VHS tapes, and a lot of them were just because it was so cheap and stuff. It was just sort of like easy to kind of go through these blind buys. And I remember finding out like I think that was kind of how I got into the Coen brothers as well. A lot of international stuff, a lot of stuff from Asia in particular. Like I think like Wong Kar-wai, that was kind of one of the ways I got through him, or got to sort of found my way to his films and things like that. And yeah, I think it's so yeah, I think that was kind of part of sort of like the early sort of stew, if you will, of my cinephilia. And I ended up going to USC's film school, and I think that was a bit more of kind of like a formal education type of thing. But I still think like my own sort of watching habits and everything like that were, to some extent, I think played much more into kind of like my education and understanding of film than any sort of school did. But from there, I started interning. I want to say it was my junior and senior year. I interned at Sundance. There was a program there for indigenous filmmakers, and yeah, so I started there as an intern. I got to go to the festival, which was kind of part of the internship, which was great. Like all expenses paid and stuff, like for starving student, it was like, why wouldn't I do
Yeah,
this?
exactly.
So yeah. So it was a really cool experience. Like it was really pretty wild. There was like this weird set of circumstances where, um, one of the jurors that, or one of the people on the jury for that year was actually Tarantino, and there was this weird sort of chain of events that led to like me at the end of the festival, like he ended up being on the same flight as me, and like he somehow knew my boss at the time, like they knew each other and stuff, and um he was like, we were kind of all walking to the terminal together, or to the gate, and he was like, oh hey, like do you guys want to go grab a beer before the flight? We got some time. And to this day I still don't totally know why, but like my boss and his assistant were like, no, we're cool, we'll just go chill by the gate. And I was like, I'll go. And so
Huh?
yeah. Yeah, so it was pretty cool. Like I mean, it was kind of just me and him at this like airport bar just talking about movies for a half an hour, and he was like super generous and like super nice. And yeah, I think we talked about like Russ Meyer films and
Yeah.
stuff like that, which is pretty cool. But yeah, it was a pretty cool experience. But that was kind of like one of my sort of first moments, I guess you could say, with Sundance, where I kind of was like, oh yeah, like I really enjoy this organization, and sort of like it just was sort of this weird thing where it was like this weird alignment of all these things, of like my own interests, my even myself being Native American, like working in this program that was just dedicated to supporting Indigenous filmmakers. And yeah, it was just sort of this thing where I kind of just kept coming back to the program. I was trying to kind of like figure myself out kind of after film school, like did I still want to do film full time? But it's like I loved watching films. I just I think it was kind of, to some extent, I think some people kind of go through that sort of like in the wilderness phase.
Yeah.
And then came around, I was the manager. I want to say I came back in 2014 as the manager of the Indigenous program. Around the same time, I also joined the programming team for the festival, on their film, or their team for short films, which was kind of like, that's, again, it's like sort of somehow I've like made a living off of like my obsessive watching habits and things like that. Or at least they prepared me for that job. Like for the short films, each of us watch about like 1,500 a year, of just short films. I think it's like, there's like films from all over as well too. And it's yeah, I just think like all of these sort of experiences sort of led me to where I am now as the director of the Indigenous program, which I assumed that title in February.
Yeah, I was going to say it was really recently.
Very recent, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think, I think like one of the things I've been particularly passionate about is, again, sort of supporting Indigenous filmmakers telling their own stories through film. Cause it's like, when you go back to, even some of the very first films, just like, that were made in like Thomas Edison's Black Maria studios, where it's like, a lot of, there've always been Indigenous people like within sort of like the, what you want to call it, a system of American filmmaking. And it's always been more from a non-Indigenous gaze to Indigenous people, or this idea of like, sort of cementing an image that was something that was based off of, the 1800s, which even at the time was already kind of like, it was, people were performing in like Wild West shows. And I think that led to, obviously everything with like Westerns and things like that. It's a whole other conversation. But I think the thing that I think was really unique with Sundance, and kind of the opportunity that presented itself with that program, is, helping people like, and these artists like finding kind of their own voice in film. Not necessarily like as a reaction to that history, although like that's definitely a part of it. But, I think it's the thing that always really excites me about my job is that, to some extent, like you're working with people who are coming from cultures that have a very long history of storytelling, and that some of those traditions haven't necessarily translated to film yet. So it's really interesting, because it's like you're kind of seeing a lot of like cinema's sort of unfolding in real time, and people figuring it out in the same way that like, people will look at like, it's I don't know, it's always an interesting thing, because it's like stuff gets lumped within sort of like their respective kind of like colonial countries that they're in. So it's like, First Nations folks in Canada, they're like, oh, it's a Canadian film, and it's like, whoa, it's they come from a specific tribe. It's technically its own like nation and everything. So it's in some ways, it's almost kind of like, if you were to see like Ozu kind of like figuring out how he was working in his own style in Japan and like making films for a Japanese audience. And so, and it's drawing on, Japanese like storytelling traditions or, different cultural viewpoints. So that's the way that I sort of like look at my job, is like, really sort of helping people find their own voice, empowering them to look into their own cultures as well for their own storytelling, that, and their own voice of how they want to tell films or make films, I should say. And yeah, and it's like, the program has a really strong legacy where, some of our bigger alumni, like I think people know off the bat, or people like Taika Waititi came through our program. Sterling Harjo, who was one of the creators of Reservation Dogs, the FX show, and then there's also Sky Hopinka as well too, who's another filmmaker working in the documentary and experimental space as well too. So there's like it's a very sort of like broad, the idea of like sort of indigenous cinema is like a very sort of broad concept, but being able to give people the space to figure out how they want to tell their stories is something I'm really happy to be a part of.
Andrew.
Oh yeah, I mean, so much to unpack. It's very interesting. Something that I've been ruminating about since I heard that you were coming on and all this kind of stuff is kind of getting your perspective, because I'm very much a student of the history of cinema, and specifically representation in the history of cinema is something that's come up very, very frequently lately in terms of all kinds of things. I just wanted to get, not to be too broad too, because you could tell a whole course in film school about the history of indigenous peoples in film, but so a point that I've been trying to make here on the podcast and just in general is that indigenous peoples' representation in film has been rather negative for a very long time, and it feels like there's been a push for other minority groups as well as indigenous peoples to have a more honest look and a more positive look over the last several years. And I just want to ask you, have you been noticing that there's been a push of that in the culture, in just cinema in general? Because there's been so much more openness about, perhaps watching a Western from the 1950s didn't have the best representation for certain cultures at the time. Yeah. And there's a whole big can of worms of like why that is the way it is. But have you just been noticing kind of more of that, specifically even in the work that you just mentioned, people being able to now tell their stories more openly?
Yeah, no, I think like, I would say, and again too, like, kind of from when I started as an intern, with this program, and, like there's a, our previous director, Bird Running Water, he had been the director for 20 years. And then, there were other folks like the program itself has been around for a little bit over 40 years at this point. Like from when like Robert Redford started it. But I think like, I would definitely say within the last like 5 to 6-ish years, like there's definitely been a shift. I think like I think it's been a couple of things. I think like, and again, this isn't like, this is just my own perspective on it. I don't, like, I'm sure in 20 years someone will have the answer, but like just from being on the ground, like, and seeing some of the stuff that I've like sort of seen boiling up, like, I definitely think that there was a shift that happened around, at least within the US, around when Standing Rock happened, where I think that because it was kind of one of those things where, and it's almost kind of like every 20 years, like there's some sort of a major event that happens within like Native America that like people just kind of remember us or something like that. Right. But I think like with Standing Rock, I think it was something where it was, I think to some people, the more enlightened, I guess you could say, like where maybe they're like a little bit less aware of us or something like that, where they're like, whoa, this is like, what was it? I think it was 2016, 2015 or 2017, where it's like, this is almost 500 years and this is like still going on. And so I think that was part of it, I think. And I think just within sort of the culture of media and, how stuff gets played on repeat all the time on news channels, I think that there was a moment where people kind of saw a lot of this tension happening. And then I also think too, kind of after that, I think, um, you know, without getting like too political necessarily, like I think that there was, I think a lot of like the racial injustice and unrest that's happened in the last couple of years has really sort of, highlighted, or at least sort of like called into question a lot of assumptions that people have had about, underrepresented communities. And I think that, I think, which is something I think I've definitely noticed in the last couple of years, like especially with the term BIPOC, with that being used more broadly, I think people start to kind of, people at least are questioning a bit more, like, oh, what does the I stand for? And it's like indigenous. And so I think that because it's sort of like put at the forefront to some extent within sort of like the conversations people are having, I think that that's been one thing of it. And I also think, in terms of sort of the explosion, or no, I shouldn't say explosion, but at least the blossoming of indigenous artists, both directors and writers working specifically in TV, over the last few years. I think a big part of that has been, specifically connected to, not all of it, but a good chunk of it has been connected to, Taika when he won the Oscar. And I think, sort of with a lot of his popularity that he had garnered, he sort of had opened the door up for, a number of his friends and people that were also alumni of our program, specifically that were like, Native American, like from like, Taika's from New Zealand, he's Maori. But, like specifically sort of opening the door to indigenous people here, where you get things like Reservation Dogs. And then, there's also a lot of other people working on like Dark Winds, that AMC show that just came out on Sunday. And then I think there's also like, there's a Marvel, show that's in the works. I think that's based off of that Echo character.
Yes.
Which it's like, it's like, there's a fairly sort of like broad, I mean, and this is like, I mean, I think it's relatively unprecedented in the sense that it's like the amount of work that is happening and people working on those shows. I mean, that's like 4 native run shows for the most part. Like, well, there's also Rutherford Falls, which, Sierra had kind of, she'd gone about that on her own as well too. But it's like, again, it's like there are all of those shows that are happening at the same time, which it's like, that's never happened before. But it was like, kind of like one person had to open the door, and it sort of like opened up this like, this kind of like mini floodgate, so to speak, in terms of like, all of a sudden people again are like, oh, cool, like there's Native American people outside of the context of a Western or whatever. It's like, you're just seeing people, like there's a sitcom on Peacock, like Rutherford Falls, where it's just, Native Americans just going about their life, or like some of them are nerds, some of them are like, kind of mean or whatever. It's like, but there's a whole like sort of swath of like indigeneity in all of these films that's explored and kind of just like there. And also, again, too, sometimes playing with the context of the Western, but also like something that's ultimately sort of in control of, that's in control by indigenous artists, which I think has been a huge thing, compared to, I think, a lot of the stuff beforehand, where it's like, there's a director who maybe outside of the Westerns, like there might be somebody who had good intentions or something like that, but ultimately like it kind of becomes this thing where they're kind of controlling that narrative, and it's like not whatever, however you want to describe accurate or whatever. But I think that that's definitely been, sort of a lot of that in the mix has kind of contributed to what's going on. And again, too, there are also people that like I'd mentioned before, like Sky Hupinka, who's been within the art world, really been doing a lot of great work, and people have taken notice as well too. So it's like, it's always, well, yeah, it's a good time to be indigenous, I guess you could say. And it's like, I mean, it's always been good, but it's been maybe harder at different times. But it's like, I think a lot of the labor and the effort and, the work that, previous generations have done, I think is really sort of paying off in a way now across the board, film and television and stuff, in a way that, I think even 5 years ago, I didn't even necessarily, I knew something like this was going to happen, but like, I didn't think it was going to happen like all at once.
Right. Things
So,
are moving so fast now culturally that
mhm.
things seem to be changing from moment to moment, specifically entertainment wise, I would say.
Yeah.
And I just want to also ask you, do you find it that the biggest obstacle in terms of positive representation of indigenous people on film is kind of changing the cultural traditional mindset that's kind of been um, brainwashed into us for decades, for the lack of a better term, of the on-screen depiction of the inferiority of indigenous peoples. This idea of like, good white people are good, the cowboys are good, natives are bad. This kind of cultural thing that's been kind of you know told to every generation over and over again for decades now, and it feels like that mindset is the toughest thing to break because it's so ingrained in the culture.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, I think also too, like, I think, which I think, maybe ties to a certain extent to America's Protestant roots.
Yeah,
Like, there's always a need to see everything on a binary. And so there's always like, there's good and there's bad. And like, there's always one camp of people that's always going to be in the bad group. And I think, for a good chunk of history within this country, we've been, by de facto sort of the bad guys. And like that's shown in films when it's like, when you think about the logic of it, you're like, well, these people are kind of just like, protecting their home and their family and their way of life. And that's, somehow that's painted as like, people kind of stopping progress or however people want to say it, but I think yeah. And I do hope that a lot of that's changed. I think that again, hopefully people are a little bit more enlightened. I mean, I'm also kind of a huge cynic as well, but I think it's like, I think that, there's always going to be problems, I think, but I think we're in a better spot now. I mean, it's always moving forward. That's the thing. It's just, it may not be at the pace that maybe necessarily we want it, but it's happening. And, I think hopefully, I think a lot of things that people were doing even a decade ago when it would come to like their ideas of Native representation, or even like in terms of different things of pop culture, like mascots or things like that. I think a lot of that is, I find it harder and harder to believe that like people don't know that sort of stuff is like not an issue anymore, or like that it like, if people engage in certain things, it's like, it's almost like they're reacting to somebody telling them like, these are people, like be respectful.
Yeah.
yeah,
And
it's
so,
it's kind of
yeah,
like they're holding on to tradition just for the sake of holding on to tradition. Like what
yeah,
you said with the mascots, with the names of sports teams and the way the mascots look and the logos and all that stuff. It's like they're inanimate objects. They don't have actual, real life meanings. The only meaning they have is the meaning you, I guess, put on them. So changing
yeah,
them shouldn't be a big thing. But of course, people are incredibly
yeah,
stubborn and don't like
yeah,
to
yeah.
change. They don't like
Well,
change.
yeah. And it's the same thing with film too. I mean, I think like, um, kind of within the mix of like my tenure at Sundance, before I came back this last time, I was the film curator at LACMA here in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. And, I'd get a lot of requests from people to play westerns, or a lot of like John Ford films, which I've got like my own feelings on it. I'm sure they're probably not as obvious, I think, as most people would probably expect me to have. But I think like, I think it's interesting because it's like people would ask me that sort of stuff, and then like they would find out I was Native American, and then they would kind of like, you could see their like tone change a little bit, where they're like, oh, well, like maybe I shouldn't be asking this. But it's like, I think it's, and that's not to, I mean, I like plenty of westerns and things like that, but I think that there's you know it's not saying we should get rid of any of those films or anything, but it's just like, it's one of those things where I think you have similar things where there's some people where they like will refuse to kind of like engage with the film anymore than what they think it, like maybe their first exposure to when they were younger and seeing that stuff. And it's like anything else where it's like, I think there's always the difference. There's always a thing of like when a film gets made, the culture and the this societal kind of climate of the time. But that's the other thing that I also like, I love about film is that as history keeps going on, stuff takes a different meaning. It takes on new sort of there's a new discourse that always sort of like, I think if a film has legs, it'll have a continual discourse around it. And yeah, it's just always interesting to me because it's like, people want to hold on to kind of their first sort of exposure to some of that stuff, or maybe the nostalgia that they feel for it, or like maybe even to an extent like some of the stuff they enjoyed in that film that hasn't necessarily aged in probably a great way. And so I think that it's just interesting to me, yeah, because again, I think film's a similar thing where people have their own sort of feelings about things or their own sort of memories or appreciation for them in a way that sometimes I think if I think a lot of times I think if people want to like keep it going forward, that's just like kind of part of the journey, if you will, of being a cinephile, is that films continually kind of change and yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's just you can still like stuff that's maybe got some problematic things in it. It's just about acknowledging that they're problematic. Like
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
It's all people are asking for is, like you said, just respect. Like respect
Yeah.
that thing that might not be cool, that we didn't realize wasn't cool before. That you just acknowledge that. And
Yeah.
yeah, one thing I wanted to ask was that you talking about representation in film, and how you're getting a lot more indigenous people behind the scenes working on films, writing films and stuff. Where is your position when you see certain filmmakers that are maybe of a different background, white directors touching on subjects that have to do with indigenous things? For instance, you got filmmakers like is it Taylor Sheridan doing a lot of Western stories that have a lot of indigenous people in it, or like the Yellowstone shows, things like that, or like Martin Scorsese's new film coming out, I think this year, is it Killers of the Flower Moon, or what do you feel about like how when you see other filmmakers of different ethnicities working on things of indigenous stories?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's, how would I put it? There's like a couple things, I guess, to that. Is like, I think one, it's like obviously I think it also kind of depends on what the film is engaging with. Like, I mean, there are certain things depending on how specific you get with different tribal cultures, where there's some stuff where they don't want certain things out, like, but more from a cultural sense, where it's more from their own protocol, where they're like, don't film these ceremonies, or don't like just different things like that. And I think because, again, to sort of the history of indigenous people in film, like, I think there is sort of a hyper awareness that we have of like the images made of us that aren't in our own control, and like what happens when those get out, and how that affects policies that actually come back and affect how people live, or how people have to move through the world. So I think that there's that. I think I think a lot of the time I think people need to maybe do an added step of just working with communities, just to kind of like get on their level, and and make sure that they're okay with some stuff. And I think also yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I would say on that. I mean, even like one of my favorite films, The Exiles, is it's a great film if you haven't checked it out.
What's the film called?
The Exiles.
Okay.
Yeah, it was 1961, directed by Kent McKenzie.
Okay.
And he was at the time a USC film student, and it was like his thesis project. And at the time here in LA, there was a neighborhood downtown called Bunker Hill. And it's interesting too, because it's an LA neighborhood that in the 50s and kind of early 60s was filmed a lot there. Like, so like, Kiss Me Deadly, if you've seen that, like the Robert Aldrich film, was like, that film is a great film, but it's also like, it's notable because it captured a lot of things in that neighborhood. And then a little bit after The Exiles, like, so early 60s, the neighborhood was actually raised. And so that's where, like, you see like the Walt Disney Concert Hall, like a lot of the skyscrapers and stuff of downtown LA, like are like on where that neighborhood used to be. But anyways, though, so Kent McKenzie, he there was a fairly large community of Native American transplants, from other reservations and communities that moved to LA. That was sort of a neighborhood that that people stayed in. And he, he spent some time with different folks. He kind of recorded their stories, like just from audio and stuff. And with them, he kind of pieced together. I mean, it's a false story to the extent in that, like, he staged a lot of the relationships between the different people. They were kind of like his collaborators in that. But he filmed kind of this really beautiful film where it takes place over 12 hours, where it's like, I think, late afternoon to early morning, of just kind of these these Native Americans, these new transplants in the city, kind of just living through the city, like partying, going to bars, or like um, going to go see movies in downtown LA and stuff. And it's a really beautiful film. And again, too, I mean, there are issues with that film in terms of how it's aged, I think. But I mean, for me, it's like I love watching that film because when I watch that film, it's like I like see like my grandparents when they were younger in that film, and it's like I've never seen anything like that in film. And so and again too, it's like like I said, there are issues and people have issues with that film, but like for me, like I there's a certain quote unquote like authenticity to that film that I've never seen in anything else. But it's also like, it's directed by a white guy who's from England, and it's like I can't deny that it's like not a good film or like whatever. So um but yeah, I think it's what I would say though too is also like with a lot of like studios or things like that are making films. I also think it's I understand like the commerce aspect of it, of like, cool, we have to get these established directors to tell these stories because it's part of a draw. But it's also kind of like, you know if you guys like look just a little bit more to the left, there are a lot of indigenous artists that can also do something that's probably just as good, or it'll be a different take on it. And so that's kind of what I have to say for the most part on that. Like, I'm not against people telling our stories necessarily. I mean, I think there's a way that they have to go about it, and a certain awareness and sensitivity, and a little bit of added work. But I think they, yeah, I don't know
if they're really wanting to tell the story in a genuine way, then they should want to do that extra work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the same thing where I think like, in the same way that I don't think, indigenous people just have to tell stories about indigenous people.
Exactly.
As well too. So, yeah. So that's my thought on it. So.
Yeah, I would say there is. That's kind of an interesting last thought you said there, is that, just because someone is indigenous, just because someone is African American, white, French, Italian, whatever, they don't specifically, I guess, have to be restricted to telling stories about their culture. But like you said, it is kind of, it's different. There's a different perspective there. There's a different nuance. Perhaps there's certain details that, someone from a specific culture would think to add in that someone's not from that culture may add in. It kind of feels like, but you're right in the sense that it's you don't have to kind of play within a certain box. I think cinema in general is kind of like open in that regard. And it's interesting kind of how, how that's, people kind of want to close the boxes now in a certain way, but also they want to do it negatively versus positively, because like you said, it's great now that we have so many people telling indigenous stories who are indigenous. They're behind the scenes, and those are the people who unfortunately obviously don't get the spotlight as people who are actually on screen and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's important for people to remember that it's not so much about the people on screen versus the people behind the scenes. It's interesting just how that's changed over the last little while. And when it comes to kind of like the history in general, I know you don't want to get into too many specifics, but was it always like in your consciousness about seeing you and your culture represented on screen and how they were represented on screen, or did that just come like over time through your cinema education?
I think that kind of came outside of that. I mean, I think like, I don't know, like I think like maybe kind of, I have thought about this because I mean I do make some of my own films and stuff, but I think I always, for me, it was sort of like the thing of starting off with cinephilia, and then it was like to a certain point where it was like I want to make this, like I like, or to some extent I want to like have a life that this plays a very prominent part of, like however I make money or pay rent and stuff. And I think that I've been very fortunate to do that so far and to be in this position. But I don't think like from the onset in terms of like being a kid, for me it wasn't necessarily like I needed to fix like an issue of representation or something. But I think it was really something where, again, as I sort of like became more involved with Sundance and the Indigenous program, that it was like much more kind of a, how would I put it? It was kind of like my own awakening, because it's like I would sort of like look back on things and I'd be like, yeah, I was like, I don't really I can only really think of like two films that I ever saw growing up that were actually directed by indigenous directors, and like and also kind of questioning like, well, why was that? Like why was that so out of the ordinary, or like why, um, even as like a kid, where it's like, you kids play cowboys and Indians, and like why was it that like I always felt bad that I had to play the Indian and stuff like that, like those sort of things where it's like, it's not until you get to a certain point later on that you're like, you kind of see the impacts that film has. And and I was talking about this with somebody too. It's like there's really kind of like just two ways to look at film. One, that you think it actually does have an effect in a way in terms of what it changes, or it's like you don't. And it's like those are two different ways of looking at it. And but there's nothing really in between, you know what I mean? Like you kind of like, I don't think somebody can be like, yeah, it kind of does, but it also kind of doesn't, because it's like it always kind of does, depending on it, based off of how I view it. I think that like, film has the power to change a lot of things, and to to affect people's lives, both you know with the people on the screen, the people making the films, and also like I think with audiences. Yeah, so I think like, kind of to your question, it's something that I kind of came to at a certain way, but it wasn't anything that was like kind of conscious, where I wasn't like, I didn't have like a traumatic experience as a child and I was like, I must fix this. Like, it was it was more just kind of like, I had kind of, once I'd gotten to a certain place, I was like, oh, this is like what this is, and this is like what I want to keep doing. And so it was just kind of a gradual thing.
Yeah, I had a similar, I mean, not in the same wavelength, but like, like even at me as a film fan wanting to discover more different types of film, I feel is like a similar awakening I had, and that a lot of that came through meeting Andrew here and him opening my mind up to other, like when I first discovered Satyajit Ray, that was he's become one of my favorite filmmakers, and just continues to make me want to learn so much about that culture, and just him as a filmmaker and a person, and just I feel like that's the kind of a similar feeling. Yours was more about how you wanted to steer your mindset when it came to how you were making or representing yourself, and mine, I guess that's the same way I feel. Is that I look at myself when it comes to my, how I describe myself as a cinephile. I like to say that I watch everything, like I don't, there is no boundary, and yeah, that's great. It's a good thing. It's a great thing. I feel more and more excited about discovering things all the time now, instead of just putting myself in a box and saying I only like watching the Spielbergs and the Scorseses and the, and it's now I'm always pleasantly just everywhere. It's
or it's like, I think there's also just those folks too that like and this drives me up the wall. Like I don't understand this, where it's like some people, and I love these films too, it's not knocking them, but it's like they're only into sort of like the pop culture hits from like the mid 80s to the mid 90s, and it's like that's it. And I'm like, it's just kind of weird to me, because it's like, if you're just going to go to like a restaurant and you're like, I only eat hamburgers, it's like, hey, I love hamburgers too, but there's like, there's so many options of like, that's again one of the beauties of film, is like, there's no how would I put this, there's no I don't really distinguish between sort of the high and low and stuff like that. I'm like, there's like, I'm like, there are plenty of ways that a film can be bad, but it's also like, I think that with anything you can kind of take something away. And I think that, it's just like, it's one of those things again too, where it's like, I don't know. I think you just need to be open to more experiences and things like that, which I think film's a good gateway, like you were saying, with a lot of like the Ray films and
and you need to be you need to be secure in what you like. Don't be afraid to say you like, the movie I just showed you before we got on, Ticks, which is just a creature feature from the 90s that not a lot of people have probably seen, and I thought it was solid. I thought it was it's like, it's okay to like that stuff.
It's totally it's okay to be open and honest with what you like, but it's also, like you said, cinema is so vast, movies are so vast, that it's almost endless in terms of where in which you can go when it comes to genres and subgenres and action, comedy, thriller, body horror, whatever. And then it's also like there's an exploration of different cultures, because cinema is also international. where it's like you can learn about Japanese culture, you can learn about Chinese culture, you can learn about Indian culture, Middle Eastern cultures, all those things. It's all out there, and it's all available to us now more than ever before. And that's I
Yeah.
think what has been really restricted for people for decades upon decades. And that's probably a lot of the reasons why you just said people like a specific thing because they've only had perhaps only have had access to a specific thing for
Totally.
forever, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And I
it's all
think it's
about
also
accessibility.
yeah, and I think also just understanding different people's point of views too. Like I mean, even outside of culture, where it's like, I mean, even within, the US, like, I mean, I love Ed Wood films. It's like it's great. Like you can watch his films and you're like, this is like made like there's only one person that could have made this film. You know what I mean? It's like or even like I got the Andy Milligan box set a
Oh
little
yeah.
while ago.
Yeah.
And it's like it's great too. It's like I'd only seen um which one did I see? I think I had only seen like Flesh Pot on 42nd Street, but I was like, I gotta keep watching this stuff. But it's like again too, where it's like it's something where you watch those films and you're like, that's the thing I love about a lot of that stuff that you were saying, which even like labels like Vinegar Syndrome or Severin and stuff. It's like they're really, and I think even before that too, which is another and sort of my longer cinephilia kind of journey thing, like definitely like the Something Weird label like really kind of just opened up my mind to even being like how do like it completely changed my mind about like how people can even like make films and stuff. And so yeah, it's cool like for that because again it's like I think again people that kind of like label things like trash, which it's like I like saying that, but it's like because I enjoy it, but but more from a dismissive thing where it's like you're again, there's like so many things where it's like just look a little bit to the left or the right, and you'll find like something you'll enjoy or something that you can appreciate.
Yeah, film's a spectrum. It's the whole big long yeah.
And I think the term trash or trashy movie has had a bit of a change to not be literal anymore.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
It's like a movie can be trash, but that can also be a positive thing.
Yeah, totally.
And I just think, for me, everything comes back to John Waters. So, his movies are literal trash. He is known as the Pope of Trash, but that's what makes his movies so unique is that they are indeed trash, and he's extremely open about it. And it's like, when we made these movies, we didn't know what we were doing. So this is what you got. and this is completely unique and true to who we were at the time and who we are. So here it is. You can take it or you cannot take it, but it's at least it's open and accessible and people can view it. And even
the lack of shame too is I think that's the main key to it, where I think that's the thing that like really separates the stuff that's trying to be ironic, that's almost kind of like making fun of that stuff, versus again where it's like you watch an Ed Wood film, there's no irony in that in any of those films at all. Like even like with John Waters there is a little bit, but it's more about like he's reveling in what he enjoys.
Yeah, like he's purposely trying to do things to provoke people, like trying to disgust people or trying to get people to cringe and turn away or something like that.
Totally.
There is like that to it, but it's also kind of like honest about it as well. I even think of David Lynch. You have the Inland Empire right there next to you, and it's like, and it's like David Lynch.
Signed too, so
David Lynch was a big opening, like eye-opening filmmaker for me because I had never seen films like that ever. And then I watched like Blue Velvet and Mulholland Drive and Lost Highway, and I'm like, I didn't know cinema like this existed, let alone could be done in such a way that could be transformative. Just challenging your mind in a way that's unlike anything you'll see. And and that's a completely different type of immersive experience when it comes to movies.
Yeah, totally.
Now, let me ask you, with your work at Sundance, I know you have a lot of programs over there where you're working with indigenous filmmakers and things. What do you know? And this is my own uneducation. Are there any good places that I know you guys probably show films and things that have been worked on during the Sundance season, but is there places where people can access it year round from indigenous filmmakers that you think are places people should be going?
Yeah, well, I think like from a theatrical standpoint, like one of the things we're actually doing now is we have what we call it's our Indigenous Shorts Tour, and so we sort of collect a bunch of the shorts that have played at the festival and that we've also supported that are by Indigenous filmmakers. So that's been sort of playing regionally in different places over the past 2 weeks. I think there's one more set of screenings this weekend. So yeah, definitely check out our website. There's stuff on that, but also people will be booking it after that. So it should be in a lot of different art houses, which is cool. Another thing too is I think there's not necessarily like one hub for a lot of things, which has always I think been I don't know if you'd say like a weakness, but it's always been up until streaming. Really, it's always been hard for I think for people to access a lot of these films because it's like a lot of them would kind of like live and die, so to speak, on the festival circuit. But I think one of the like I definitely think the Criterion Channel has done a really good job with a lot of that. They have again Sky Hupinka's feature film Mothni. A lot of his short films, they're films by Caroline Monet, who's a really amazing filmmaker out of Canada. And just recently, too, they actually just put up, I think it was one of their collections for this month. I think it's like 6 films by Warwick Thornton. He's an Aboriginal Australian director. And a lot of that stuff is great. I think like with Warwick Thornton's work, too, a lot of that stuff has not been available in the U.S. Because of rights issues and things like that. So and I think like, yeah, one of my favorite films of all time is playing in that, which again, I saw that at a festival and I have never seen it since. So I'm really excited to revisit it. It's a film called The Dark Side, which it really sort of leans into what I had mentioned before about people leaning into their culture for like storytelling, like new ways of storytelling. And it's an incredible film. It's definitely check it out. So I think, Criterion's been a really great avenue for a lot of the newer work. And I think also too there's a lot of this stuff is also available on like just the different streaming platforms, especially the stuff where you can rent things. But yeah, those are kind of the main hubs that come to mind immediately. So.
Yeah. And so in closing, like what is there, I don't know if you want to specifically say anybody in general, but like are there some voices out there, some artists, some people that you would love to shout out? Anybody that you would say you're working with, or anybody that you think you should be looking on the rise for in the coming years?
Yeah, there's a filmmaker, a Kumeyaay filmmaker from just outside of San Diego named Fox Maxey, who's actually one of our fellows. But they just had some films play at MoCA here in LA, the Museum of Contemporary Art. I think they actually have one of their shorts called Mott. It's like MAAT. I think that's playing on the Criterion Channel as well. But I think that they're really kind of one of the people I think of as sort of being one of the people at the forefront of kind of like this newer generation of Indigenous filmmakers that are making some stuff. I think I'd mentioned a lot of the names from before as well too. But Shundeen Tome is another one. She's a Dene Navajo filmmaker from New Mexico. She just had, it's also a part of the shorts tour that we're doing. It's in there, but she had a new documentary that played at Sundance, a short documentary, and then it played at South by Southwest, and it won the grand jury prize there.
Nice.
So it's that one's doing numbers on the festival circuit, but Shundeen's definitely somebody to look out for, I think.
Awesome. And I guess one more thing I should ask, being that this is a film podcast about physical media, is your physical media collecting. Do you do any of the collecting?
Oh yeah, no, totally. I have a cabinet here. It's like I'm kind of a big nerd about it. So it's like this cabinet here are just DVDs. Downstairs, those are all the Blu-rays.
Oh, okay. They got priority down there near where you watch stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's also just like it got. I that was my whole thing too, because it was like they were just kind of getting. After moving a couple times, it's like they were kind of all just blended together, and I was like, the height difference.
Oh man, yeah.
Like looking at it, yeah. So
I understand, man. I understand. I don't even keep my DVDs out anymore; they're just in boxes.
Yeah, totally. So it's like, yeah. So I think that's kind of been the thing downstairs. It's like I have my all the Criterions down there, all the Vinegar Syndromes, the Severins, and I take that back. I actually the DVDs I do have downstairs are stuff from the Warner Archive as well. So I really went hard on a lot of those.
Oh yeah, well they got that sale was when they had the 4 for $44s and things like that. God, I miss it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, I think definitely with those two, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, I still do that. I still track down a lot of those Warner things too, because it's also like, speaking of representation stuff, there's like a lot of, especially pre-code stuff, like with indigenous characters or looking at indigeneity that are, really interesting. And it's definitely one of those things because of like their era, they're not going to be on any streaming service for a number of different reasons. So it's like, definitely like, I'm putting those in a vault at some point.
Well, we just talked to when we talked to Eddie Muller. We were talking about Flicker Alley, and Flicker Alley is putting out a film called The Silent Enemy, and it's yeah. And me and Andrew watched it, but they were like bastardized versions of it because it was like mine was like 30 minutes cut out of it, and then his had more in it, but they both looked terrible, of course.
Oh yeah, it was public domain probably, and and there was a narrative there you couldn't keep up with the narrative because things were cut in such a way. It was a very interesting film, unique at the time it came out because that was 1930s, wasn't it, Stephen?
I think it was like 1920.
It might have been in like silent. Yeah,
it was silent. Isn't it? Yeah,
it was like 1920. And it was like
it was a Canadian
Canada.
film about indigenous people to surviving a winter and having to move and find food and et cetera, et cetera. It was more of a documentary, but also fictional because it was with actors in it. Yeah,
that's cool. Well, I'm curious too with you guys, like what's some of the stuff, or I don't know if that's cutting into your future podcasting. What's some of the stuff that you guys have bought recently?
Oh man,
like whatever.
Well, yeah. Other than Ticks, I also got Thriller.
Oh,
nice Vinegar Syndrome new set, and then I got Warriors over here from Imprint.
Oh,
nice set, and then they got the Neo Noir set I got sitting over here. Cool. We're always buying stuff. This would turn into me getting up and running back over here with presents in my hand. But Andrew's always got stuff around him. Yeah,
surrounded me. I got Buster Keaton Rides Again, which is put out by one of the partner labels from Vinegar Syndrome, and it sold out fast. Like this thing was selling right out of the gate, and it was one of Buster Keaton's last movies, and just kind of fascinating. And the more interesting aspect of it is, just learning about him and where he was at his point in his career at that time. I did also get Arrow's Wild Things because it's a movie I've never owned in any format up until now. And this was super popular when it came out.
Yeah, I just revisited it with the 4K, and I was like, as a kid, of course, I wanted to watch the sex scenes. I'm not even gonna lie. I was a kid, and I knew that the girls were gonna get naked, then so as an adult, and I'm past that, I'm like, I'm revisiting it. I'm like, this is actually a pretty good movie.
It's a great film. It's like it's just there's so many weird turns in that film that you don't see. Like on the first watch, you don't see it coming at all.
It's I don't know what it is right now, but 90s neo noir seems to be getting a big push on physical media, and it's like you're going back to like that 90s thriller, over dramatic neo noirs type stuff, and it's like you're revisiting stuff. And it's like, this stuff was a lot better than we remembered.
I just need a really deluxe edition of LA Confidential to come out. Please, somebody.
That's what we all need.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Sick of that stupid eco case crap that got put out. There's, please, somebody out there. Please.
Yeah. Totally.
But we're, my buying habits are going to have to slow down pretty hard with the baby coming. So, but I got stuff coming in. I got Indicator stuff coming in still that I already paid for. So
that's cool.
But I've been trying to pick up a lot of the '88 films, like Golden Harvest stuff and whatnot, and because it's all that's actually we talked about stuff that not really exposed to. I didn't really watch a lot of the old '70s kung fu martial arts films, and so I'm kind of catching up on all the Shaw Brothers stuff now. Now that it's all getting like released in Blu-ray sets and whatnot. So it's kind of a whole big like avenue that I've never delved into before until now.
My friend got that. It's Arrow, right? Which
the Shaw
pretty
Scopes,
incredible. Yeah. So I know that. I think
I got it around. I got everything.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. We have an exchange where it's like with some of the bigger box sets, like one of us will buy it and we'll just kind of like, go back and forth. So he let me borrow that, and I let him borrow the Pasolini box set that I had, the Criterion one.
Yeah. So what do you typically like? I mean, I know you said you collect a little bit of everything, but it's not you like Criterion is Criterion kind of your sweet spot?
Yeah, I would. I mean, yeah, I think like they're definitely like a standard for me, I would say. But I think also like I don't know why like it was. I mean, maybe it was just I was spending more time online, but like it really wasn't until the pandemic that like I kind of came across like, or I just got more familiar with like Vinegar Syndrome and Severin also through that. So, and they do great work too. I mean, like that was like all those sales they had. I dropped so much coin on them. So, like,
Same here.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think like some of the with Severin as well too. I was trying to think, what did I got? It was like the Andy Milligan box set, Anthropophagus as well too, which is an incredible film. Like I'm always like surprised that like that film's not more on the radar for people. But Cruel Jaws was another one as well. I think The Sinful Dwarf, I got through that too. And then,
you went deep in there into the catalog.
Yeah, that's my childhood habits just going all the way. But yeah, with Vinegar Syndrome though too, they do some really incredible work too. I think it was like, I don't know why, like I think I didn't know. Just for some reason they just weren't on my radar or something. But like once they were, I mean, I regularly go through again like all their stuff of seeing like what's streaming, what's not streaming, like what like this looks like a great blind buy or that sort of thing. But
that's what we kind of do on the show is we, I mean, like when we started doing this show almost a year and a half ago, we were probably pretty much in the gear of like Criterion, maybe some Warner Archive, Arrow, but some of the other labels like Severin and Vinegar Syndrome weren't in our buying habits yet. And then we started doing the show, and now we're buying crap. We're buying so much crap from them. It's stupid.
Well, I think our tastes broadened in terms of collecting tastes, and I think it even went a little international. With getting stuff from Indicator, from Australia. What is interesting about the Australian stuff is you do get a lot of, indigenous people's stuff there as well. Stuff back from the, Ozploitation era of the 70s and whatnot. And it's really interesting to kind of delve into Australian culture because they have a whole complicated history with their indigenous peoples as well as here in America.
Totally.
And that's a whole different history to delve into when it comes to cinema and movie making and whatnot. So it's another thing that's kind of ties back into what we were talking about representation and all of those things. So Stephen?
Yeah. We got a little bit.
Got a little sidetracked.
We got to stop ourselves because we'll keep going.
You were trying to land the plane, and then it just
let's land the plane here. Well, Adam, it was great. It was great having you on, man. We appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. And if there's ever any kind of thing you want to promote or anything you ever want to come back on and talk with us again, we would love to have you back.
Sure. Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks for having me, guys.
So what's the best, if anybody wants to reach out to you, what's the best place?
I think Twitter, and hold on, I got to look up. I can't remember what my handle is. It's just my name. It's Adam, ADAM _ Piron, PIRON. I'm on that. That's probably, if people want to reach out to me, that's probably the best way to get it.
All right, man. Well, thanks again, and we'll see you later.
Thank you.
See you guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Well, I guess let's get into Blu-ray announcements, Andrew.
Yes, let's do that. Let's transition to the main part of our usual podcast episode with some Blu-ray announcements. Now, Stephen, I've said in the past that we've had some sparing weeks of kind of not much going on. And once again, we are on that road.
I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on lately.
I don't know.
This is like 2 weeks out of the last month that have been kind of slow.
Yeah, things seem to be more spread out. And I guess we just got a lot of announcements earlier in the year, like the first half of the year. We got so much, and then now everything is starting to actually come out, like in stores and online. Everything is starting to get to our homes now. So maybe things are slowing down a little bit, and then they'll probably ramp up.
If we want to be honest with ourselves, we don't cover everything. So there's probably things we're not even going to cover today that we could cover. but we just don't have time for it. in the sense of like, it's not, sometimes some of these very small boutique labels that put out something every once in a while, it's hard to find some of that stuff because they are so obscure. And sometimes
and honestly, a lot of them fly under the radar in terms of like just
the announcement.
Like, they'll
themselves.
be announced and you won't even know. Like there's not exactly, you know, a CNN version of like a ticker tape at the bottom, you know, giving us constant information. You kind of have to seek it out or stumble upon it once in a while.
Sure.
But moving on from there, Steven, where do you want to jump into first? Maybe, you know what, MVD.
Yeah, let's do MVD.
Because we don't talk about them much. And MVD is a kind of a cult hit label, you know? They're called MVD Rewind Collection, and they've got a list of three movies that I assume people are familiar with a little bit, perhaps. And these are all coming out, I think, in October. And the first up here is Disturbing Behavior, a 1998 teen drama thing going on. We'll get into it.
Yeah, we'll get into it.
Then there's the movie The Chocolate War from 1988. This is coming out in September. And these are all individually numbered, so the Disturbing Behavior is I'm not sure which number actually, but I can tell you that Chocolate War is number 42, coming out in September, and then we have Canadian Bacon, which is technically the last film from the late great actor comedian John Candy, and it's actually directed by Michael Moore.
Oh wow!
Who is, you may be familiar with him from his documentary work.
Yeah.
Bowling for Columbine, Fahrenheit 9/11, a bunch of other stuff. This is actually his only like fictional narrative film that he's ever directed. Everything else I think has been documentaries.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, when I saw that, I'm like, is that the same person? Is that the same person? But apparently it is. So Steven, where do you want to start? Have you seen any of these movies? Because I feel like people know of these movies at least.
Yeah, I'm definitely aware of these. The only one I can say for sure I've seen is Disturbing Behavior. And this, if this doesn't sell you on the movie, okay, let me paint a picture for the audience here. Let me do it in the movie trailer voice in a way. From the writer of Nicolas Cage movies as Con Air and Gone in 60 Seconds. And directed by one of the many guys that directed on Game of Thrones, comes Disturbing Behavior.
Wow, that's a hell of a sound.
I know, right?
Disturbing Behavior. I used to get this movie confused with The Faculty.
Yes.
After seeing, because they came out around the same time.
Well, the thing is, they have nothing to do with each other, though. I mean,
but they're both like set with like teenage characters in high school.
Sure.
Weird stuff going on.
Let me say real quick. The director is David Nutter. Writer is Scott Rosenberg. Just wanted to say that before I got it.
Good. Yeah. And I believe, David Nutter directed, a
bunch of episodes.
A lot of stuff for HBO and TV now.
Yeah.
Like, he's directed on The Flash, as well as he directed a couple episodes of Smallville.
Oh, yeah.
He actually directed the pilot of Smallville.
Oh, yeah.
Crap.
Yeah. So he's got the money.
I guess.
I mean, the guys that direct the pilots are the ones that get a lot of the. I mean, like, ain't they the ones the ones that usually direct? I mean, I guess unless they're not the ones that created the show,
right? Usually not.
But
so
typically,
much,
the ones that are the executive producers, like that are for instance, Eric Kripke, that does like Supernatural and is now doing The Boys. He's the creator of the putting it on television, and typically, them guys direct the first episode. A lot of times.
Yeah, sometimes a lot of things they do, I know this is more TV talk than movie talk, but they do get like big time movie directors to direct the pilots. Because usually what used to happen is the pilots were kind of miniature movies in and of themselves, and they would basically put a lot of stake in them.
Yeah.
A lot of stake in them. I don't need to go through the whole pilot thing, but just like, I know like Jon Favreau's directed pilots, Martin Scorsese's directed pilots, J.J. Abrams has directed pilots before. So they get big time people.
It definitely varies.
To kind of sell the show.
Yeah.
To sell the show to the networks and see who's going to buy it and make it a series.
Yeah, it's definitely it definitely varies, but a lot of times I see that happen.
Varies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then sometimes a big time director will be an executive producer basically meaning that their name is attached to it.
Yeah.
Because I know like Martin Scorsese has done that with Boardwalk Empire on HBO and stuff like that. But it's interesting. But yeah, David Nutter, that's where he's from. So he's done a lot of TV work, and like you said, the writer has done work as well. But Disturbing Behavior is interesting because it's such a time capsule of a movie. If you watch this movie, the actors in it, Katie Holmes, James Marsden, Nick Stahl, all like young actors from the late 90s and whatnot, and you know who these people are. They went on to be in bigger things. Katie Holmes was, of course, in Dawson's Creek right around the same time. James Marsden would go on to be in X-Men 2 years later. X-Men would come out. And, of course, he would be in other films. Nick Stahl, I know, was in Terminator 3.
I was going to say, let's not forget about Nick Stahl in Terminator 3.
Yeah, Rise of the Machines. I always thought he was a good actor, Nick Stahl.
Yeah, I like him. Yeah.
He was in the movie In the Bedroom, which is a criminally underrated movie. I think it was nominated for Best Picture in 2001 with Tom Wilkinson. He had a small part in that movie, but a vital part in that movie. Marissa Tomei was in that movie as well. Also Sissy Spacek. So yeah, that's a movie that actually doesn't have a Blu-ray release, at least not here. And
you put it out. You put it out in the universe, Andrew. You just did.
Yeah, hopefully they listen to me. But back to Disturbing Behavior. So in Disturbing Behavior, you got these three kind of outcast kids in high school, and they're noticing that there's a bit of weird stuff going on in their town. The kids are getting turned into kind of like these
Stedfordy,
preppy, like normal, like not normal, but like super proper.
Yeah.
Whatever, like studious, whatnot. They're losing their individuality, and essentially what's happening is there's a little bit of brainwashing going on, a little bit of weird sci-fi tech stuff going on, where these kids are getting turned into something that they're not. So they're trying to figure out what's going on in this town, in the small town. And it's fine. It's definitely of the time. Like there's the soundtrack in this movie is kind of fantastic. Late 90s, like alternate rock music is in it.
Yeah.
It's something Steven, I think, would really like, because I know you always harp on like where are the soundtracks, where are the soundtracks for movies anymore?
Well, that's what I grew up in. I grew up in movies having some sort of soundtrack, good or bad. Like even the crappy Batman movies, had some soundtrack music that was, some of it was good.
Kiss from a Rose by Seal is still
amazing.
Still sung at every karaoke bar on the planet, at least.
But Disturbing Behavior's got a really good supporting cast too, like Bruce Greenwood.
Yes.
William Sadler's in it.
Yes, he is. William Sadler plays like the best character in it. He's like this kind of crazy janitor type character who's like hunting mice the whole time. It's a weird movie. I didn't say it was great, but it's a really cool time capsule piece from the late 90s. I thought it was fine. I rewatched it last night. It does have that Faculty vibe too, but I think the Faculty is a much better movie.
Yeah, I like the Faculty.
Faculty is great. The film by Robert Rodriguez.
Somebody,
another late 90s like young cast in that movie.
Who didn't somebody awesome? Is it Kevin Williamson from Dawson's Creek wrote that, right?
He wrote the script for that.
Yeah.
Of course, from Scream fame, typically.
No. Dawson's Creek fame.
Oh, okay. I guess if you want to throw that out there.
Or I Know What You Did Last Summer fame. Whichever one you want to go with.
Also true.
Yeah.
But that film, completely off topic. Like I said, great late 90s cast. Jordana Brewster, Clea Duvall, Josh Hartnett, Elijah Wood is in the film. Famke Janssen, talk about another X-Men connection.
Yeah.
Salma Hayek's in that movie. Piper Laurie. Jon Stewart is in that movie. Well, people know from The Daily Show and whatnot. Before he was on the host of The Daily Show, he was a comedian and actor, and he was in movies and stuff. He was in that, and he was in...
Wasn't he in Half-Baked? Or is it?
I don't know.
He was in the one of the Chappelle's movies.
He's in Big Daddy, actually.
He's the real dad.
Yeah, he's like Adam Sandler's roommate, who that's his actual like.
Well, he's not his son. He's not his roommate. He's like a friend or something, right?
I think he's his roommate. And then Jon Stewart's character, and oh man, what's her name? She's in all the
Marissa
Judd
Tomei
Apatow films. She's Judd Apatow's
wife.
Wife.
Shit.
No,
Yeah,
it's got a
we know who
Scorpio.
she is. Christina
exactly.
Taylor. No, that's Ben Stiller's
Yeah, that's Ben Stiller's ex-wife.
ex,
Yes,
not ex. We don't really know.
maybe. I'm not quite sure.
I think they're separated, but they're
I believe they are separated. But what's interesting? Oh, Leslie Mann.
Leslie Mann.
That's who it
Jesus
is.
Christ.
Damn. Whoa,
What is
took me
wrong
forever
with
to get
us?
to it. Great actress. Completely took me forever to get to it. But yeah, remember she's like his girlfriend. She's like Jon Stewart's girlfriend, and then he goes away on like a business trip, and then she's like still like living at that apartment or something, and they have a run-in. Anywho, completely off topic. I'm just saying Jon Stewart was in The Faculty and whatnot, but disturbing behavior, pretty cool. You gotta you had to be there at the time. You need context for that.
You got to get in a time machine to watch this movie.
Yeah.
So you need to fill your room up with flannel and
yeah, it's that late '90s like post grunge era.
Yeah.
So there's still flannel around, but it's kind of fading.
but the music's turning more into Limp Bizkit and not.
It's like
and,
that
and
late
Linkin
90s,
Park.
Linkin Park, all that kind of stuff, kind of coming around. But
And the hair of boy bands is coming like the bleached blonde hair.
Yeah, and they had like that parting in the middle,
And then it was like it always looked wet. You know.
Yes.
We grew up through it. I know
pictures from back then.
I might have done that at one point. Who knows?
I was just gonna ask.
Jail was a part of my life. At one point.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How? Okay, I hate to say this, Andrew. I have to bring this up. Was there a time when Andrew had hair?
Only when I was very, very little.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I had.
I know with your
off on
health,
top.
with your health, yeah.
Yeah, I had cancer when I was 3 years old, so I lost my hair at 3 and never had it after that.
Damn.
So there was a time.
It left your beard alone. It left your beard alone, though.
It did actually.
That's nice.
That's actually very interesting.
Yeah, you never think about that.
You do. Yeah, so you do lose. People who've gone through chemo, radiation treatment, you do lose all of your hair. But I guess it really all depends on the situation, I guess. I mean, I know a lot of people probably listening are probably a lot more, experts on it, maybe, perhaps. But it just all depends.
Yeah.
Really all depends. But moving on from there, we have The Chocolate War, which is an interesting title for this movie.
Is this a movie? Is this like Willy Wonka versus like... Is this like the Untold Story or something?
No, it's not.
Okay. Oh, thanks for...
This is a movie from 1988, directed by Keith Gordon, who I'm not even sure if I've seen... He's done, yet again, another kind of a director who's done a lot of TV stuff in modern times. Like, he's directed episodes of Homeland, he's directed episodes of Fargo, he's directed episodes of Dexter, The Killing. Yeah, so a lot of more TV work, even early on in his career. He's only really done a handful of feature films. But this film is interesting because it takes place at a Catholic school. It's kind of very low-key Catholic, very low-key film taking place all in this kind of one place. And so there's this kind of group of kids, this gang of kids, if you will, called the Vigils. And they kind of run the school. And they're also partnered with the administration, and the person in charge of the administration is John Glover, who plays a character called Brother Leon. So every single year they sell chocolate to raise money for the school. Private school, they need money, whatever. Maybe they don't have endowment funds and whatnot. So he decides that they're going to sell double the chocolate that they sold the previous year, 20,000 boxes. And that means that every kid has to sell like 50 boxes. And what happens is this one kid decides he's not going to sell any chocolate. He's just not going to do it. So every single time he asks, the brother asks, how many boxes do you want? This kid says, none, I don't want any. And what ends up transpiring is this whole kind of the hierarchy of like who's doing what, and kind of like, throwing a monkey wrench to this whole hierarchy system. And this one kid is just kind of messing things up for everyone, because there's this other kid who's kind of the head of the Vigils. So he's like kind of has this power, but his power is now, threatened because the administration is mad at this kid because this other kid won't sell the chocolate. And then so there's a whole chain of events going on here, and it's very dramatic and a little bit over the top, but it's very surreal as well sometimes.
Andrew, I'm gonna have to.
It's interesting.
I'm gonna have to say though, this sounds boring as hell.
You would it gets a little boring midway through, and then towards the third act,
How long is this
it kind
movie?
of gets a little bit like. There's one
Okay,
scene
it's an hour and 40 minutes. That's
Yeah, there's one scene where it's like where these kids are just talking, and it's like you got to move on from the scene. It's there's too much exposition. It's
Yeah.
got to move faster, and it slows down, and the tone is a little off from time to time. But it's not a bad movie. It's not thrilling.
yeah.
It sounds thrilling, like there's this whole political thing going on here, but it's done in a very slow, kind of methodical type way.
Okay.
And the acting isn't quite as dynamic as they think it probably is being presented to us. That would have kind of elevated things. Like John Glover's great in it. I was just talking about Smallville.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
John Glover
yeah.
was on Smallville. It's interesting connections here. Interesting like WB show connections with Katie Holmes from Dawson's Creek and then John Glover from Smallville. But yeah, he's really good in it, and he's just like yelling at these kids to sell chocolate. and I remember being a kid in elementary school having to sell chocolate. I don't know if this ever happened to you, Steven. This happens now, I don't know, everywhere. But we used to have to sell chocolate in like this catalog to people, and you could, depending on how much money you raised, you could get like prizes and stuff and whatnot. And I just remember that as a kid, and that was when I was in public school as a kid, and I'm like, why are we raising money at a public school? Isn't it government funded? But that's neither here nor there. But that happens all the time, and basically what would end up happening is your parents would have to like take the chocolate like catalog to work and like, try to pawn it off on their like employee
Did
friends.
you buy this
or
overpriced
not
candy
friends.
for my
Yeah,
child?
like, buy my kids candy. Yeah, that's like, come on. and the chocolate would be way overpriced.
Way over.
Just way overpriced.
Yeah.
And not great. Not exactly like Hershey's Kisses here or anything like that. But that's the Chocolate War. But then getting into the movie that I think a lot of people know.
Oh,
of
wait,
the
wait,
most
wait,
maybe
wait,
is-
wait a second. There's a
that's
point you forgot to bring up. The
What's
the
that?
Kate Bush song.
Oh my goodness! Thank goodness I told you that before
know.
the show. So you reminded me. So in the end credits of this movie is the Kate Bush song. What's it? Running Up That Hill.
It's called Running Up That Hill. Yep.
Yeah, and of course, right now it just happens to be one of the biggest songs in the country once again because of Stranger Things, which dropped their new season as of this recording, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
And it's in a pivotal moment of that show. And so now everyone's playing the heck out of it, so it's back in like the top 10 of the Billboard charts. And the song is from the 80s. I want to say it came out 1985 it came out. And this movie came out in 1988, but this song plays in the end credits. And when I got there, I was like, oh, what a coincidence.
Yeah.
That just happens to be
It's the only reason they're releasing
a
this
big
movie.
song now.
It's the only reason they're releasing this movie. This was part of the deal.
Maybe.
No,
I
I'm
don't
just
know.
kidding. I'm just kidding. But funny fact to go along with that is that initially they wanted to play the song that has gotten played in so many movies, David Bowie's Hero. Was initially what they wanted at the end of the movie, but he wanted like $100,000 to play this song at the end of the movie. David Bowie did, so they just substituted it for this song. For Kate Bush song.
To be honest, neither of those songs fit this movie at all.
Oh, really?
Because
Should it have been something more bouncy, like
no,
chocolatey?
the movie ends. I don't want to spoil it. The movie ends very somberly.
Okay.
Very somberly, very melancholic. So I guess Running Up That Hill is more appropriate tonal wise, I guess. And the kid. What's interesting is that even though this kid takes a stand, there's really no like rah rah, like I'm taking a stand against the man or anything like that.
It's not
real,
Dead Poet Society.
Yeah, it's not like Dead Poet Society where they're standing up for their teacher and whatnot. There's no real emphasis on why he's doing it. He's just doing it kind of just to do it. Even though the administration is, John Glover's character is an asshole and stuff like that, but it's not even a direct correlation to that. He's just doing it just to do it. So that's the Chocolate War. Moving on from there is Canadian Bacon,
Which I like. I like Canadian bacon. Have you had it?
I have had Canadian
Yeah,
bacon.
it's more.
I think
It's
I've had it on
basically
pizza.
ham. For
Yeah,
us.
it's basically ham.
Yeah. It's at least, yeah. I mean, for us. I mean, now bacon? I like. Do you like turkey bacon? I like turkey
I
bacon.
don't know if I've ever had it.
You never had
I don't
turkey
know if
bacon?
maybe I have had it. I just don't remember.
I fight with people all the time about it. It's like, of course, normal bacon's great, but turkey bacon is fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, turkey bacon's not bad. I think I've had turkey burgers.
Oh yeah.
Which are basically just turkey meat turned into a
Patty.
a patty.
Yeah.
That's essentially what it is.
It's good, but regular cow beef is better.
Oh yeah, of course.
But turkey. I know I'm going on food here, but I'm just saying, like, the movie brought it up, so I had to talk about bacon. And yeah, turkey bacon's good. Canadian bacon's good. And let's talk about the movie Canadian Bacon.
Yeah, let's talk about the movie Canadian Bacon, starring
something else
cast.
with food in it. Candy, John Candy.
This movie came out. This movie came out in 1995. Like I said, directed by Michael Moore. Is John Candy's last film, but it's not the last film that he was working on. The movie that coincidentally came out in 1994, which is the year he passed, Wagons East, was the last movie he was actually working on.
Yeah, I remember that.
When he passed. Yeah. I grew up with a lot of John Candy films and him being a presence. Of course, he has a small role in Home Alone.
JFK.
Uncle Buck, he was in JFK. Of course, he did a lot of work in the 80s with, like, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, The Great Outdoors. He's in The Blues Brothers.
Uncle Buck.
Uncle Buck, of course. Uncle Buck, of course. Yeah, he was a great comedic actor.
Yeah, he was an actor that he was hilarious, but then when he needed to turn on the either the charm or turn on the sincerity, he was good at bringing on the sincerity, which is what I think a lot of good. I mean, he was just a good actor. That's the thing is, he could be more than just funny. He was a good actor.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a really good actor, and he was part of SCTV in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, the Second City. That's where he got a lot of his work from. Of course, he was in National Lampoon's Vacation.
Yeah. He very much reminds me of how I feel about Robin Williams. I mean, I think Robin Williams may be a little bit better actor, but like they both have that same like kind of chops where they're both very funny and can be very like sincere.
Well, yeah, a lot of those actors that we know of came up around the same time.
Yeah.
Like they all did like stand-up comedy early on in their careers and then transitioned to other things like maybe like an SNL or something
sketch
like that.
comedy and
sketch comedy like SCTV, Second City. There's Second City, there's Groundlings in terms of improv comedy, schools and places and whatnot. But he came up with like Dan Aykroyd and all of those actors around that era. And he had a great career, really great career until he passed away, unfortunately. But Canadian Bacon is a spoof of a movie. Well, it's a spoof at the time. Now it's a little more real. So the U.S. president, played by Alan Alda, is low in the polls. So him and his administration decide they're going to create some fake-ass Cold War to kind of spoof up his approval ratings, his popularity amongst people, because apparently the United States people love presidents who get into wars, and they decide to kind of create a fake Cold War or kind of quasi fake Cold War with Canada, and John Candy and his friends kind of take it a little too serious, so they do things like invade Canada at certain points because John Candy's character is a sheriff in Niagara Falls, New York, and so it's right there on the border. So like he and Rhea Perlman, who I think is his significant other in the movie, Bill Nunn, who was Radio Raheem in Do the Right Thing, he's in the film as well, and they decide that they're gonna like invade Canada on their own and stuff. It's very spoofy, very comedic. A lot of the comedy works, some of it doesn't work. But it's an enjoyable time. It gets a little old after a while once you're like an hour into the movie and we're still doing the same thing again. But it's enjoyable as hell.
Isn't John Candy Canadian?
Yes. That's the irony, is that he's anti-Canadian, but he's actually Canadian.
I was going to say he can do the jokes about Canadian people because he is Canadian. Like he knows the jokes. You know.
Oh yeah, and it's so funny because like they're playing on all of like the stereotypes and like the way that Canadians pronounce certain words, and they're talking about hockey. Yeah, and they're like, and of course, Toronto Blue Jays were a great, baseball team in the early to mid '90s. So they talk about how like, oh, they're stealing like America's sport or whatnot. It's silly stuff like that. But it's really funny. I enjoyed it very much. But it is a spoof. But today it's almost realistic that the government would create fake shenanigans to manipulate people's opinions. That's really a thing.
The film's evolved to being.
It's like what's a spoof in '95 is more serious now.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting thing to think about when it comes to film. That we always talk about how it ages over time, and in this case, we usually think about that in the sense of like how it meets our, I guess you could say, quote unquote, political correctness. Though I don't really believe in that, but some people did. I think almost anything's up for at least talking about in a movie. But it's typically we think about that when we're talking about and how has it aged. But in this case, you're like, well, a movie that was just kind of like fucking around ended up like aging into itself, like growing up into like reality. Like it was like ahead of its time.
Well, I mean, I don't mean to get too political, but to be honest, the Trump administration kind of changed our perception of like the buffoonery of people in power.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't want to, wherever your politics lie. But I'm just saying his administration was a mess from very, objective perspectives, whether it be a constant revolving door of people working and not working for him and all that kind of stuff. So it became almost like a real life spoof of what a lot of spoof movies would do when it came to political things, like Veep.
Yeah.
The show Veep was ridiculously over the top in its, depiction of the buffoonery and the comedic aspects of government. And yet in real life, a lot of that stuff was mirroring that during that specific administration, where beforehand, I'm getting to my point, where beforehand, that stuff was assumed, but not as obvious.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't as out in the open as how ridiculously dumb certain things were run until recent times.
Yeah.
There was always that understanding that that's probably the way a lot of it is, but it was never like, they hid it better.
Yeah.
They hid it better. But during that administration, they didn't really hide the stupidity of a lot of things going on better.
Some of that you could arguably say is a good thing. So it shines a light on the buffoonery.
Oh, very true, very true.
But
it does smash, I guess, whatever sense of, I don't know, not loyalty, but like trust that you have in the government when it's that out in the open and ridiculous.
It's not a good thing, and it's not a bad. It's there's no.
It's a double.
It's definitely a gray
thing.
area, but it's But there's been also a lot of movies, that have.
Very much so.
Hit on these, like movies about people that are not necessarily politicians, like Man of the Year. Was it the Man of the Year with Rob? Speaking of Robin Williams, he was a famous.
When he runs for president.
Yeah, famous talk show host that becomes president. And then didn't Chris Rock do one too? It was like
he did do one.
Yeah,
yeah.
It's like
wasn't that the one where like I want to say was that the movie where he like. There was someone running for president, and the person looked like Chris Rock, and then he died, and then they replaced him with
I think so. Yeah,
another person who looked like Chris Rock. I think that's that movie.
I can't remember what it's called.
Us. I know, I mean, it's not Head of the State. I don't know
it's something like that. But
there have been many political spoof movies going back decades upon decades, and they've. Actually, it is called Head of State.
Oh, is it called Head of State?
What a pull out of nowhere for me. Came out in 2003.
I mean, shit,
Yes, when a presidential candidate dies unexpectedly in the middle of a campaign, Washington, D.C. Alderman Mays Gilliam is unexpectedly picked as his replacement. Oh, I guess that's what it is. Yes. Very interesting. Almost like a Mr. Smith Goes to Washington scenario.
Yeah. I
remember when that movie came out. 2003.
Yeah, that was like one of the last I mean, I know it's not his last movie because he recently did stuff, but it was one of the last movies before he took I think a long break in acting.
Oh, you didn't like his turn in the new Saw movie?
It is. Well, he also did that one movie he directed too. I hadn't seen it though.
Well, that movie's actually very good.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that movie's really, really good. What was the name of that movie? Oh, Top 5.
Top 5.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
2014.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's been around, obviously in the news most recently, but of course he did. He was in The Longest Yard. Remember he did the voice in all the Madagascar movies.
If you want to count that.
Those were populated in the 2000s. He did the narration in that show Everybody Hates Chris for a few years. He was in the remake of Death at a Funeral, Grown Ups, and then I think he was in Grown Ups too. Yes. He's in that Julie Delpy film 2 Days in New York, which is actually a very, very good indie film that I recommend people watching. It is kind of a sequel to her films 2 Days in Paris, but you don't really have to see 2 Days in Paris, but you can if you want to. But they're both really, really good indie films.
Yeah. Another political one I was trying to think of. I remembered Facing the Crowd. That's another good one.
Oh yeah,
Facing the Crowd.
There's this movie called Buzzworth.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Another
Yeah.
one with Warren Beatty in the 90s. Is it Buzzworth? What's it called? No, I don't know what it's called.
It sounds familiar.
Oh, Bullworth. That's
okay,
what it
maybe
is.
that's what it is. Yeah.
You know what I'm thinking of? Because the Buzz Lightyear movie's coming out.
Jesus.
That's what. Yeah.
Why
so
is that on your
Bullworth,
mind?
I have no. Oh, I have no idea.
It's called Lightyear.
I don't know. It is called Lightyear. But Bullworth is starring Warren Beatty, Halle Berry, Sean Astin's in the movie, and he's kind of like this disillusioned politician who just kind of goes off the rails, and he's just like exposing politics for what it is, and like he just goes on this rap rant during the middle of this movie where he's just exposing like, yeah, you know why you don't win elections because you don't vote, and stuff like that. It's like it's really interesting movie. That's another movie that's only available on DVD and not available on Blu-ray.
Okay.
And I remember buying a used DVD of that many years ago, and still in my collection somewhere. But we've been on Canadian Bacon for forever.
Oh yeah.
A really good John Candy film, starring a lot of really great comedic actors of the time and kind of all time. I've always been a big fan of Alan Alda, and I just think he's great in the movie as this president and whatnot. Also, Kevin Pollak is in the film as well. Jim Belushi shows up in one scene. It's a fun movie from the mid '90s. It's great to see kind of a last film from John Candy.
Awesome.
But moving on from there, let's shift things a bit. Where do you want to go from here, Steven? Do you want to go Kino, or do you want to go?
Let's go Severin. Let's do the few Severins that we have.
Okay. So Severin is currently having their mid-year sale, but by the time this episode comes out, yeah,
probably not.
That won't be a factor to anyone. But these movies are part of the Severin family library, and these are the last couple of films from announcements that are specific for this sale. First up is Macumba Sexual, which is, I believe, a Jess Franco film. And then there's a movie called Mansion of the Living Dead. And there's also a movie called Shadowland?
Shadow Mind.
Shadow Mind, yes.
Yeah. And
that's to go along with all of the other movies that have gotten announced over the last few weeks or so.
And Mansion of the Living Dead is also Jess Franco.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Hold on, let me see. Okay, good to know.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's if you're a big Jess Franco, which is, of course, a big staple of Severin, here's a couple more titles for you.
They're both Jess Franco films. Yeah, they're putting out a heaps amounts of his back catalog of titles. Stuff ranging from the 70s, stuff that's his adult films, as well as his more, I guess, regular exploitative films, which are essentially adult films. I don't know. His filmography is so eclectic and so wild.
I still need to watch the noirs. I need to watch them.
The large palette. Oh yeah, I forgot about that noir. Wasn't it like
a double feature?
Double feature, yes. But they're putting out Jess Franco stuff. We talked about Vinegar Syndrome putting out a Jess Franco title. a few weeks ago. So there's plenty of his work to go around. So that's the three kind of remaining titles that they announced for their sale. Hopefully, if you're listening, you picked up some stuff. Maybe you haven't.
Yeah,
Did
you pick up
I know
something?
I picked up a couple of things. I waited like I normally do for the opportune time, if you will. I waited to pick up the All the Haunts Be Ours box set during the sale, and I'm glad I did wait because it is marked down at the lowest price ever.
Yeah.
And because they had a 24-hour box set sale on the Saturday, which was June 11th. For that whole day, they had a bunch of stuff that was marked on box sets. The first Eurocrypt set by Christopher Lee, the Umberto Lenzi Baker set was also marked down. So they had a bunch of stuff. Even the Nunsploitation, which I believe sold out during that time, was marked down to an absurdly low
like
price
$40
of like $40, which is like $10 per movie, which is incredible for a Severin release.
Oh yeah.
But I picked up All the Haunts Be Ours, All About Evil, which we've lauded over the last few weeks. That was a must buy, I think, for me.
That's the only thing. That's the only thing I was able to get. Yeah.
Yeah, and then All or Nothing, the Mike Lee film that they put out on Blu-ray earlier this year, late last year,
Late last year,
something
I
like
think.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know Studio Canal had their announcement, and then they had their announcement right afterward, and it's the same, I believe, the same exact release with the same transfer, as well as same special features. It just happens to be put out by Severin. So I got those three releases, and hopefully I get them in the mail soon, because that's the thing. I'm very impatient. When I order something, I got to get it.
Yeah.
But that's just me. So that's all we have from Severin for right now. So let's swing over to Kino, I guess.
All right.
So we've got a couple of releases. I know we went through a whole laundry list of stuff last week, and it's not a laundry list like last time. We've got a movie called Mata Hari, directed by Curtis Harrington, who directed Night Tide, which is Stephen. I think you have Night Tide, don't you?
It's an indicator release. Yeah. Yeah, and Nicholas Winding Refn helped work on the restoration for that release to Indicator. Yeah.
Yeah, and that film stars
starring Dennis Hopper.
Dennis Hopper, where he falls in love with perhaps
essentially
a mermaid.
A mermaid. Yeah,
maybe not a mermaid.
Yeah, it's weird. But, it's a weird movie.
Yeah, of course. It's always weird. But yeah, Curtis Harrington directed a bunch of stuff. And Night Tide is probably the movie he's most known for, I want to say. So that's Mata Hari. I don't know. I didn't get to see the movie.
I don't know much about it, but apparently it has. I don't know if this. It says that this film has a longer cut that I don't know is going to be involved in this release or not. Apparently, a lot of the scenes of nudity. There were some graphic sex scenes and things like that were cut out of the movie. So I don't know if it's going to include that or not, but we'll see.
This could very well be a canon film. And
really?
I don't know that for sure. The only reason I say that is because it's produced by Golan Globus, who was one of the producers at Canon Films. And this movie came out in 1985. So the stars are lining up for this to perhaps be a canon film. I'm not sure. I would have to actually look it up. But it seems like so, and there's a couple of movies called Mata Hari, and they're not related, or they're not about the same thing. Actually, it is the same movie. Holy crap! So there was this woman. I believe this is based on a true story. There was this woman called Mata Hari who I want to say this was World War I, World War II, I can't remember, where she would basically seduce Nazi soldiers and then murder them. I'm pretty sure that's the Mata Hari story.
Okay.
And yes, because I know they've done many movies based off of Mata Hari, based off of that story. And she, I believe she ended up being executed. Yeah, there was a movie in 1931 starring Greta Garbo where she plays Mata Hari. Okay, it was World War I. So it is, yeah. Yeah, she was spying for Germany during World War I. She was a spy. I think she was also committing murders as well.
She was French, right? Just to be.
Yes, that's
she was
what
French, and then she
semi-fictionalized
falls in love
account.
with the German officer, and then.
Well, that's what. Yeah, that's what.
That's how,
this Matahari.
that's how the story goes.
Is the story
Yeah.
for. The one from 1931 is a semi-fictionalized account of the life of Matahari, an exotic dancer who was accused of spying for Germany during World War One. So that's the story. I think maybe I'm thinking of someone else. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
like to
yeah,
move
like
on.
she's seducing someone to get information and documents and stuff like that. But that's kind of a 1985 version of that story. So moving on from Matahari, we have The 10th Man. Now, I did get to see this movie. This is a 1988 TV movie starring Anthony Hopkins and Kristen Scott Thomas. So get ready for this. So obviously, this is Anthony Hopkins pre Silence of the Lambs, pre most of what people know him for modern day. And Kristen Scott Thomas, this was obviously before she was in The English Patient, and all that. So this is a TV movie. I think it's based off of a book, a novel, where this man portrayed by Anthony Hopkins is, he's living in France, I think Paris, or maybe some place adjacent to it, and he's just kind of living his life. And this is during 1941 German-occupied France. And what would happen at the time is there was the French Resistance, and the French Resistance was doing all kinds of stuff like, blowing up attacks, guerrilla warfare, stuff like that. And so the Nazis were basically fed up with it to the point where they would just arrest anyone just to send a message. Whether they were part of the French Resistance or not, they would just arrest them and imprison them and execute them. And Anthony Hopkins gets caught up in that. He was one of the people who just randomly arrested, and what happens is they're going to choose 10 of these prisoners to execute, and he ends up being one of the 10, but he trades his place with another person who is dying of tuberculosis. And the person Anthony Hopkins trades him his whole fortune, his house, everything, in order to save his life. And he does it, the person gets executed, but he's haunted by it, he's, upset by it. But after the war is over and he's freed, he goes back to his old house, but now his old house is being occupied by that person who got executed's family. So he basically pretends to be not the original owner. He pretends to be somebody else. And the person who's living there happens to be the sister, who's portrayed by Kristen Scott Thomas. They have like this relationship, this romance, this thing, but he's keeping this secret inside because she hates the person that traded this wealth and this fortune for her brother's life, because she would rather have had him versus this wealth and fortune. So things get dramatic and escalate from there. It's a really good, well-acted movie. I really dug it. Once again, Kino is dipping back into the TV movie game.
Yeah.
A game that hasn't gotten a lot of love over the last from the beginning up until like now.
Yeah.
TV movies have never gotten the love, specifically physical media wise, that feature films had.
Yeah.
But I dug the movie. I thought it was really good.
And this is like not too long after he did Elephant Man. Elephant Man was 80, and this is 83.
Well, this is 80
or 80. 88.
88.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So it's after Elephant Man. So he's doing TV movies after after doing Elephant Man. After doing Elephant Man, I guess at the time maybe it wasn't such a big hit. I don't know. I mean, no, it was an Oscar. Wasn't it an Oscar movie?
Yeah, it wasn't. It was a very critically acclaimed film, but you got to keep in mind that was 8 years before. A lot of things can happen in 8 years.
Well, he goes on to do a lot more TV stuff in the 80s.
Oh, yeah. If you look at his career post-Elephant Man, we're talking TV movies of like Othello, and he's doing a lot of BBC stuff when it came to like theater work. He was in a TV miniseries about Mussolini. A lot of TV work. Holy crap. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I didn't either.
He was in a TV miniseries of Great Expectations. So there's a lot of kind of stuff like that. Then of course, the '90s I think is when things really kicked into gear. Silence of the Lambs, Howard's End. He was in Bram Stoker's Dracula. Um, he was in the Chaplin movie, Remains of the Day. So that's when things kind of escalated for
Yeah.
Sir Anthony Hopkins. But it's kind of cool to go back and see, a lesser known work from a really well known actor. Like he literally just won an Oscar, what, 2 years ago? A
Yeah.
year ago?
Yeah.
I mean, he's still very much in the conversation. Do you follow him on social media?
No.
He's a lot of
no.
fun. He does very oddball things. Like he'll just do like random dance videos on Instagram.
Sounds like
just-
an old man discovering in social media. It's
Yeah, to be honest, it really sounds like it. Like he just sounds like he's just doing whatever the hell. I don't know if anybody's like directing his social media game or if he's got a publicist or if he's doing it himself. But Anthony Hopkins is on like Instagram and stuff. It's
Interesting.
very odd. It's very young, very hip.
I-
But what do you think of that movie, Steven?
I wish I could tell you something about it. I don't know.
Yeah, I was.
I
yeah,
haven't seen it.
It is coming in both the 178:1 and 133:1 versions of the film. I watched the 133:1 version because obviously that's how it's originally shown on TV. But yeah, there's nothing in the way of special features or anything like that. So moving on from there, we have a movie called Summer Heat, which came out in 1987, and it's a movie I know nothing about. But all I know is that it's starring Laurie Singer, who was in Footloose and The Falcon and the Snowman, and Anthony Edwards, who was in Miracle Mile, which is an amazing film.
Isn't he like a regular on ER? One of them doctor shows or Grey's Anatomy?
Let me see.
It's
I
ER.
think you
It's
are-
ER. Yeah.
It's ER, yeah, because ER ended years ago.
He's
now that I
he's
remember.
also the other detective in Zodiac.
Yes, he
Yes.
is. He was also in Revenge of the Nerds. He was in Top Gun, which of course is now in the news as well because things just never really go away from 30 to 40 year time
Apparently
span. Everything. I mean, Jurassic Park is in the theaters now again as well. So it's nothing ever goes away.
Not really. Kathy Bates is in this too.
Oh, nice,
Yeah.
nice.
So this is this looks like this might be like a romance drama type of situation in a small town. Depression era farm wife is drawn into an ill-advised affair with Jack, their hired
Their
hand.
hired hand.
Mm.
Oh, that happens.
That's how it goes.
That's how it goes.
But I mean, could be good.
I was looking up the director. This director only has 3 movies in her career: Broken English, Summer Heat, and The Island of the Mapmaker's Wife. Wow. She was an assistant producer on Days of Heaven, the Terrence Malick film from 1978. Very interesting. But yeah, I haven't seen the movie, so I can't really comment on it. But I'm curious about it, just from that perspective.
All right.
Moving on from there is a movie completely on the other end of the spectrum. Doesn't look like a romance drama to me, Stephen. Mercenary Fighters.
I
starring
think
Peter Fonda.
I think look, we know that a lot of movies in this time period had a lot of homoerotic things going on. I haven't seen this, but this could have some dude on dude parallels that we're not seeing. For instance, Top Gun.
You do have to, talk about Top Gun.
Yeah.
That beach volleyball scene.
Jeez.
What is interesting is like you have to appreciate a movie that is very specific and very, not hiding the fact of what the movie's about when it comes to the title. Mercenary Fighters, and it's about mercenary fighters.
What do mercenaries do? They fight.
Yeah, what do mercenaries do? They get hired to fight. It is. I believe it takes place in Africa, and there is obviously tribal warfare constantly happening in Africa, and then of course, people get hired as mercenaries to fight in these wars, and I believe that's the premise of this movie. And I think I want to say Peter Fonda's probably
Peter Fonda's
the
in
lead
it.
of this mercenary group who get hired to fight in Africa.
Yeah, based off the poster, I thought that was Dolph Lundgren on the front.
I thought that too.
Did you?
I thought that exact thing.
Yeah, I was like, nah, I guess not. I guess that's not him.
Yeah, it looks like just a still from the movie of just somebody yelling with a machine gun, which is really that's an 80s vibe if I ever did see one. It really is. But this is getting a brand new 2K Master theatrical trailer. This is a Code Red and Kino Lorber tandem release coming out in August 23rd. Moving on from there is a movie I actually did get to see. Of course, I had to jump on this right away because my classic movie loving heart could not stay away. And this is a movie called When Tomorrow Comes from 1939. This is getting a brand new 2K Master, new audio commentary. And this is a movie starring Irene Dunn and Charles Boyer. This is a movie that I really, really liked a lot. It's a movie about two people very similar to like A Brief Encounter, Before Sunrise, very similar where they have this very brief, very powerful connection and moment in each other's lives, even though they cannot be together romantically outside of that for extenuating circumstances that I won't get into because of spoilers. And do not, for the sake of cinema, do not read the synopsis on IMDb because it literally gives away the main third act twist in this movie.
Them son of a bitches.
Who wrote that synopsis?
Them terrible. Son of a bitches.
Like, what is in there is literally a third act twist that changes the perspective of the movie and the perspective of the relationship between these two characters. And it's probably supposed to stay hidden until that reveal.
You should probably report that, Andrew.
Yeah, I probably should. I'm so vitriol right now. But this is directed by John M. Stahl, whom I'm sure many classic film fans know.
Leave Her to Heaven.
Leave Her to Heaven. That's what popped into my head right away. And it's not. It couldn't be more different of a film than Leave Her to Heaven. This is a much lighter.
That
film
one's a little heavy. Yeah,
that one's a little heavy. He of course also directed Magnificent Obsession, Imitation of Life, another two of his films that I really, really like. And yeah, he directed a lot of movies from the teens all the way up through the late 1940s. John M. Stahl did, and he has he's not overly stylized. He's very plain, very basic, but a solid, storytelling style.
Yeah.
He really knows how to frame these characters for maximum visual effect. And it's a really, really good movie that I liked a hell of a lot. I've been a big fan of Charles Boyer for a while. I just have absentmindedly watched so many Charles Boyer films, just not even realizing it. He just seems to pop up in a lot of movies I watched in the 30s, in the 40s. He's in Gaslight with Ingrid Bergman and Joseph Cotten, which is a great film, which is where the term gaslighting comes from. And he was in so many other films like Hold Back the Dawn, a film starring Olivia de Havilland as well as Paulette Goddard. I think Olivia de Havilland may have won her Oscar. No, she was nominated, I think, for that role. Yeah, that was a film that was also nominated for Best Picture as well as Best Screenplay. Look up Charles Boyer because he's an actor I don't think a lot of people know from that era, from the 30s, from the 40s. He gets overshadowed, I think, by a lot of other more well-known actors. The Jimmy Stewarts of the world, Cary Grants, Humphrey Bogarts. He gets kind of overshadowed. But he's a really solid, very smooth actor. So that's that movie, and it's a really good film. Out of all the stuff from Kino that we're talking about, that's the movie that really piques my interest the most to actually own.
Okay.
Like, that's something I would buy at one of the Kino sales that they end up having.
I take that seriously. I take that very seriously.
Good. But moving on from there, they did have their official announcement for Paths of Glory, the 4K UHD release of that, coming out also August 23rd. But we knew this was coming. I don't know what you think of that cover art, but
it's I guess you could say it's sort of propaganda-y looking. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it.
Well, it's just what is interesting is It's not a still shot from the movie. It's not a. I don't know. Maybe it's taken from one of the posters,
Maybe.
from one of the original posters. That's what it looks like to me. It's hell of a lot different than the Criterion release cover art that was put out many, many years ago. Um, but but yet again, it's one of those where I'm curious on how it's going to look. I'm just starting now to get my hands on a lot of the 4K UHD releases from Kino and just kind of looking at them for the first time in hand. I know a lot of people have bought so many of them over the last year or so, but they seemingly be doing an okay job with these releases. I mean, they're releasing a hell of a ton of them, so they better be doing something right.
Yeah.
People keep buying them. They keep selling well. But I'm a big Kubrick fan, but I think I'm going to hold off on this release for a little bit, personally.
Yeah, I don't feel. I mean, Criterion's release is fine. You know, I don't feel the need to go grab this.
Yeah, it is getting a new audio commentary. It is getting, of course, it is from a new 4K scan of the original camera negative. It's getting new Dolby Vision HDR master. It is getting the works. So if people are interested in it, it is coming out in August. I'm pretty sure many people have pre-ordered it by now. But I just wanted to mention it because I know we've touched on it a little bit, but it's official now. And it's coming out in August. But moving on from there is a bit of a surprise for me now in terms of a movie that I really ended up enjoying quite a bit. And this is a movie called Some Girls from 1988, starring Jennifer Connelly and Patrick Dempsey. And Andre Gregory is also in the film as well, from My Dinner with Andre, with Wallace Shawn and Andre Gregory. The music is done by James Newton Howard, directed by Michael Hoffman, who directed One Fine Day. And I don't know if I've seen any of his other work. But this is a film that's a bit of a coming-of-age movie, and I'm always a sucker for coming-of-age, teenage, romantic comedies, romantic dramedies, whatever you want to call them. And this movie caught me a little bit by surprise about how much I enjoyed it. So, Patrick Dempsey's character is a young man, I think he's in like college or something, and he goes to visit she's not quite his girlfriend, she's not quite like a significant other. They're kind of, I guess, maybe like he likes her, she likes him, one of those things, Steven. You know, young flirtatious love and school stuff. And he goes to visit her family in Quebec for the Christmas break. She's gone there because there's some medical things going on with her family, so he goes to visit her, and her family is rather eccentric. Her father is played by Andre Gregory, and he's like, he'll walk around the house and do sometimes randomly and stuff, and he's just like he's like quoting like poetry and Shakespeare and walking around reading books out loud and stuff. He's an eccentric academic type. And her mother, I believe, is French Canadian, and she's rather eccentric herself. Her sister's in a relationship with some hunky man or something like that who sneaks into her bedroom at night. They're a well-to-do family. Like, their house is like a freaking castle, basically. But it's like old school, like you know, like stonework and like brickwork, and there's like small rooms and corridors and attics. You know what I mean? Like this big kind of wealthy house to do. And he's kind of swept up in their life while he's trying to court Jennifer Connelly's character, I guess you could say. Like, he's trying to be with her. She is kind of playing with his emotions a little bit, and he doesn't quite know what the status is, and he's kind of there along for this ride over this Christmas break. And things happen, and the film is rather all over the place structurally, but the third act of this movie I thought was really, really strong. There's a lot of things that are touched on, a lot of good thematic work going on, a lot of sincere work, and a lot of like coming of age things going on, and a lot of things said about life and memories and certain things. But it's an eccentric film, and I really ended up enjoying it a lot. Out of all the movies I watched for this podcast this week, this was one of the better ones. This and the film with Charles Boyer and Irene Dunn, I really liked a lot. So I would recommend this. I really would. I know it's probably a movie that's been relatively under the radar, even though it stars two people who would be much more well known later. Even though Jennifer Connelly had a very active career early on in her life, specifically in the 1980s, obviously with Labyrinth, but she was also in a bunch of other films. Steven, this is completely random. Not really. Actually, it's related to Jennifer Connelly. People are just realizing how great Jennifer Connelly is now because of the new Top Gun movie. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, when the Top Gun movie hit, like everyone was posting on social media about Jennifer Connelly as if they didn't realize that she's been one of the most, like radiantly gorgeous actresses that have been on screen for the last like 30 to 40 years.
Yeah.
And it's like, people, have you been asleep?
I grew up specifically remembering the movie A Beautiful Mind. Her in A Beautiful Mind.
Yes.
Is where I kind of got a crush on her in that movie. Yeah, beautiful great actress.
Yeah, she's a fantastic actress.
Yeah.
Her career hasn't, it's been a little different later on in her career as it's gone along, but she's still a great actress. Beautiful Mind, I remember her being in that.
Requiem for a Dream is.
Yeah, that's a powerful movie.
Yeah.
That's a movie that sticks with me, even though I've seen it like once or twice.
Yeah.
That's the Aronofsky film. Aronofsky is a very provocative filmmaker.
Oh yeah.
And that movie has got to be one of his most provocative films.
Blood Diamond was another one.
Oh yes, with
Leonardo
DiCaprio. She was also in The Rocketeer. She was also in Labyrinth, like I said. She's in Phenomena, which is that Argento film. She was actually in Once Upon a Time in America, one of her earliest roles, which obviously I just got to watch recently for the first time for the Unwatched Pile.
Yeah.
So I got to see her in one of her early roles. And then she was in like Higher Learning.
Yeah, I was going to say John
Singleton.
Singleton's Higher Learning.
Yeah. And then she was in Pollock. She was in remember the Hulk, Ang Lee's Hulk?
Yeah.
She's Betty Ross in that movie.
Yep.
Yeah, she's been an established actress for a very long time. I just thought it was odd that people were posting about Jennifer Connelly as if they were discovering her for the first time, which is kind of part of the magic of cinema and the magic of movies, is no matter how old you are or what era you're in or anything like that, you can always discover like people you didn't know, movies you didn't know, actors, directors, whatnot, and it's perfectly fine. We've talked about this a million times.
Yeah.
Just because you come to a movie 50 years after somebody else has seen it doesn't really mean it's not as valuable to you as it is to them.
Yeah.
But that's this movie. Some Girls, kind of highly recommend it. And
Cool.
Moving on from there is one last title from Kino. Of course, it wouldn't be a Sunday day without them announcing something. So from a 2019 HD master from a 4K scan is a movie called Ace High from 1968, starring Eli Wallach. And this is a movie that I know nothing about. It looks like a Western.
An Italian Western.
Yeah, it's probably one of those spaghetti Westerns.
It looks like it's got comedy elements, though. That's what it's saying here. A recently escaped bandit forms an unlikely alliance with two bounty hunters and an acrobat to get revenge against the people who framed him. So that sounds interesting.
Yes, it's directed by Giuseppe Colizzi.
Amazing.
That is a very Italian name. It stars Eli Wallach, who, of course, was in many films. Specifically, he was in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, The Magnificent Seven. He worked all the way up until he was nearly 100 years old when he passed away at 98, and he was still working at the time. I remember him being in the Oliver Stone sequel to Wall Street wasn't it called Wall Street Money Never Sleeps?
Yes.
And he's in that he's in that movie in 2010. I just remember he has like this great monologue about like the collapse of the stock market, the collapse of our economy, because that's what that movie was kind of about. And it was I think it was one of the first times I ever saw Eli Wallach, and I was like, who is that? This was before I had seen him early on in his career. But yeah, that's Ace High. So spaghetti Western, Ace High. So moving on from there, Steven, we get to Eureka.
Yep, our last thing here. Eureka.
Our last thing, and our only real kind of official slate of the companies we typically cover. And Steven, do you want to take this?
Sure. So we got 3 different releases, but 4 movies. We'll start here. We have the film starring Kirk Douglas, Man Without a Star, from what year do we got here? 1955. And then from 1920, we have Buster Keaton's The Sapheads, or The Saphead. And then we have a double feature release of Angela Mayo's Hapkido and Lady Whirlwind. And yeah, I mean, this is an eclectic group here.
Yeah, we're going all over the cinematic spectrum.
Yeah, we got a Western, we got a silent film, and we got Kung Fu.
Yes, we got everything. So, Man Without a Star starring Kirk Douglas. This is a King Vidor film. King Vidor directed a movie called Duel in the Sun, which is one of Martin Scorsese's favorite films. And that's the reason why I know it. Duel in the Sun is a film that came out in 1946 starring Jennifer Jones, Joseph Cotton, and Gregory Peck, Lionel Barrymore. Walter Houston's in it, Lillian Gish. But King Vidor directed that film. And that's how I know who King Vidor is. But he also obviously directed this film as well. And this is a Western starring Kirk Douglas, who is, he's this like nomadic cowboy who kind of gets caught up in a range war between like these two factors. Range war being like who owns this land, who can put livestock on this land, who can't. Can it be fenced in? Can it not be fenced in? All this kind of stuff, and it's very it's very Western-esque.
It's
good.
I liked it. I enjoyed
seen it.
I think Kurt Douglas is very likable in this role. I really enjoyed his. He's kind of like, he comes off as like not wanting to be involved in anything, but then he kind of like the woman that runs the ranch. He kind of like digs her, and in the best terms, he wants to have sex with her.
Yeah, they have like a relationship back and forth, and a kind of a romance, kind of antagonistic.
It's quippy. It's quippy. They have a good rapport, and it's like Pam and from The Office. Pam and what's his name? Jim and Pam. It's before they got together. But so yeah, and he like saves the life of like a young guy who doesn't know what the fuck he's doing.
No, he's a hothead.
God, he's an
a young
idiot.
Kid who thinks he's all that,
Yeah.
and he's just really young, really naive, very green when it comes to being
a cowboy, I guess.
A cowboy in general, and he's just like he's getting in fights with people. He's trying to go after people. And it's like you're gonna get yourself. You're
not built to live in this world.
Yeah, you're not. Yeah, you're not gonna be long for this world, or you're doing stuff like this. So he kind of takes him under his wing and tries to like mentor him, but things end up going a little south with their relationship. And there's a lot of things going on in the movie when it comes to interpersonal relationships and stuff like that. You get a whole backstory as to Kirk Douglas's character and why he is the way he is and why he has certain feelings about certain things. Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
It's not bad. But moving on from there is, what's the next film, Steven?
The Saphead?
Let's go with The Saphead, which is Buster Keaton's, I think, first feature-length film that he was in.
Yeah.
And this is, if you think of a typical Buster Keaton film, this is not
it's
it.
Not it. Yeah.
This is not The General.
Yeah, this is him doing a more just a straight up dramatic romance role, where he's, playing this guy who's just trying to meet with this girl, gets kind of like stood up and it's there's multiple characters. It's an ensemble cast. What happens is Buster Keaton was, I think, in a bunch of shorts beforehand, like as many people started out, and then like they liked him so much that they put him in this role based on a stage play. And I think Douglas Fairbanks Douglas
done
Fairbanks
the role beforehand.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of taken over for Douglas Fairbanks as this role of this guy who his name is Birdie, and he's like the son of like this um Wall Street like stock market tycoon type person, like who has a company and has like a silver mining company and whatnot, and he's kind of just like a screw up like son who like stays out all night and stuff like that, but he's doing it out of trying to be cool.
Yeah.
He doesn't even like it. He's just doing it because he has this woman that he is involved with, and he wants to look appealing to her. So he thinks like staying out all night and not coming home until like 3 a.m. is like the cool thing to do. And he's not even having a fun time doing it. And that's very, very interesting in terms of
I did that.
even in modern times, men and women whomever do things to look appealing to whomever they're interested in. And they'll do dumb things that they don't even like to do.
Exactly.
Just to look appealing.
But the funny,
1920 showing
but
that
the funny thing about that is half the time the women that you're gonna want to be with, or vice versa, they don't really want to do that either.
That's the irony of this movie, of that aspect of the movie, is that the woman that he's interested in, Agnes, I believe, doesn't like, just wants him to be around. Women she's like, where is he? He's standing me up. Where is he?
Yeah, women want reliability. They want, and of course they want your love. They want your loyalty.
I think anybody, when it comes to personal relationships, I think pivotal is reliability, loyalty, connection.
Trust. The trust.
Just being there in general is a big thing.
Yeah.
And he's out, like, he has the complete opposite.
He's trying to come off as mysterious and bad boy, like.
Yeah, he really is, and he's not that at all. He's kind of like
he's a doofus.
He's kind of the opposite. But his brother-in-law is that to a certain extent. His brother-in-law Mark, the character Mark, is has a son out of wedlock with some other woman, and basically his brother-in-law pins the fact that he has this I guess you could say bastard child. He pins it on Birdie, and then Birdie kind of just like accepts the blame to kind of save his sister's reputation, I guess, or to save his sister's relationship, and it ends up destroying his relationship with, of course, this other woman who he's literally about to marry. Like, he's on like the way down the aisle to marry her, and this kind of explodes in his face, and he's kind of shunned by his father, shunned by his family, and his life is kind of destroyed because of it. And it's just the movie's only 77 minutes long, and there's so much plot in it.
Yeah,
there's so much plot. And then he's got to basically not only rebuild his own life, but he's got to also save his father's business on the stock market, because his brother-in-law, dumbass, decides to sell certain stock or certain stuff or whatever, and it's gonna like destroy the company and whatnot. So he unequivocally ends up like saving the company as well. It's an interesting movie with a lot of things going on for it, but doesn't feel like a Buster Keaton film.
No.
Like, it's not the cameraman. It's not the general. It's not, Sherlock Jr. It has none of that energy to it.
He hasn't figured out his identity yet.
It has none of that physical aspect of Buster Keaton.
Not
which
really.
Buster Keaton's so damn entertaining.
Yeah.
That's why the movie for me is not great, because it's rather stuffy and it feels like a play.
Yeah.
Which it is. So that's the Saphead. And this is coming out. When is this coming out, Stephen? Like August?
I believe these are August releases. Yeah.
August 22nd. This is previously restored by the Cohen Film Collection. Cohen Film Collection, I mentioned here a few times, is putting out a lot of Buster Keaton stuff on Blu-ray here in the U.S. They've put out a lot of stuff here. Kino still owns a bunch of stuff. We just talked about Kino. I think Kino still owns like a bunch of Buster Keaton shorts, and they have like a Buster Keaton shorts collection. I think it's still in print.
I got it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so his work is kind of spread around a bunch of different companies. Eureka has also been putting out a bunch of his stuff as well. And so there's a lot of Buster Keaton to go around, but it's very confusing as to what is the best release versus what is what's the best release when it comes to features, what's the best release when it comes to restoration. That's kind of work that you have to put in to kind of figure out. I'm assuming the earlier Kino stuff is from older masters, because those came out like a decade ago. They came out a while ago.
Yeah.
But moving on from there, we have the double feature, the Angela Mao, Hapkido, and Lady Whirlwind. What is interesting is I watched one of these, and I think, Steven, you've seen one of these as well.
Yeah, I watched Lady Whirlwind, and you saw the other.
I saw Hapkido.
Yep.
What'd you think?
I enjoyed it. She is a badass.
Oh yeah.
God, she's a badass. I don't know what it is. I mean, like, I almost honestly had so much more fun watching her kick people's ass than some male driven, kung fu films. She's just so good at I mean, the choreography is amazing, and the shot selection's great in this particular movie. I thought, she plays like a character that, is kind of like getting pulled back and forth. Like she thinks she needs to hurt this one person, she needs to get revenge on this one guy, but then that guy really is kind of like misled, and then she has to like help him get his revenge, and it's like she kind of gets pulled back and forth. But she's a cool character. I very much want to watch more of her stuff. This was the first time I had seen any of her films, so yeah. This is one I'm probably going to pick up, because it's
cool.
It's definitely something new, and I'm building up my martial arts film collection. So,
I believe. So Hapkido is a Golden Harvest film, and I'm assuming that Lady Whirlwind was also a Golden Harvest film.
It is.
So so there's plenty of Golden Harvest and Shaw Brothers stuff to go around now, and more of it just keeps coming out. And this is like early kind of, I would say, lower budgeted Golden Harvest type stuff. So in Hapkido, Hapkido is basically a form of martial arts, I think from Korea, if I'm not mistaken. And this actually takes place during the Chinese occupation in the late 30s of China, of Korea. And basically they go over to China, and there's this whole local, like, or do they go over to Japan? I don't really remember, but either way, these students from this Hapkido school end up traveling to this place, and they end up getting caught up in this martial arts rivalry school type thing going on, where like these different schools of martial arts are rivals with one another, and they end up fighting with one another. And there's a lot of like prejudice versus, whether it's Chinese versus Japanese, and then Korean in there as well. A lot of political stuff, going on, of course, around that time. And obviously to this day, there's still a lot of political stuff in that area of the world, and just the world in general. And of course, one of the students happens to be Angela Mao, who is like just kicking ass. Like Steven said, she's just kicking ass in a lot of things. She kind of takes the reign of this fight against this other school, and just decides to like, I'm gonna like kick these people's asses, and she does. And Sammo Hung is in the film as well. He plays one of the people that's in her school. I think he worked on the stunt coordination or the stunts in this movie. So the stunt work is fantastic. The choreography of the martial arts is fantastic. Yeah, these Chinese, 70s kung fu films are really awesome. They're really, the plots are okay. You're not really watching for the plot, you're watching for the action.
Oh yeah.
And when the action hits in a lot of these, it hits pretty hard. And it goes on. Like, once you think someone's down, they're not really down. It just keeps going and going. So that's Hapkido. I'm curious about this release, but there is a wrinkle here. This release, which is being put out by Eureka, is Region B locked to the UK, but Arrow is putting out this subsequent release here in the US market. So that's probably going to be coming in a very close at hand Arrow slate coming up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of looking at features, I guess.
Yeah, if it's the same features, then we're good. Then it should be good.
Yeah.
I mean, they're both getting new 2K restorations of both films, and I know both of them could use it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hapkido looked okay, but it was clearly standard def DVD quality. From what I saw from Lady Whirlwind, it may have been even worse quality.
Yeah, they both came out in the same year. So
yes, both 1972.
And I believe Sammo Hung also worked on Lady Whirlwind too as a choreo.
Yeah, and I think Lady Whirlwind has an alternate title.
Ooh.
Yeah, isn't it called like?
I'm not sure.
Let me look it up.
Yeah, look it
Lady
up because
Whirlwind.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, Lady Whirlwind has Lady Whirlwind's American title, U.S. title, was called Deep Thrust.
Oh,
which is a terrible title.
It's not. This doesn't sound like the same type of movie.
No, it doesn't.
That sounds like a Jess Franco movie.
It honestly really does. Yeah, that's a terrible
title.
Like, it doesn't even sound like a.
It has nothing to do with the plot either that I can think of.
It doesn't do the plot or fighting or anything.
The plot is about her trying to get revenge for, I guess, the man who she thinks kills her sister, but then that man's being pursued by gangsters, so she decides to help him so that she can kill him herself. I mean, what does that got to do with deep thrusting?
I have no clue. No clue.
I mean, but it's okay.
But when I was looking up trying to find Lady Whirlwind to watch, I got more hits when I chose the U.S. title. Not for the obvious reasons, Steven.
Of course not.
But just like in general than for Lady Whirlwind, which is a much better title. Lady Whirlwind's a great title for a movie. It reminds me a lot of like Lady Snowblood, which is also another great title.
Yeah, well, it works better than Deep Thrust.
Yeah.
But all right, well, that's it for Blu-ray Talk this week. Thanks again to Adam Piron for coming on. We very much enjoyed talking to you. And Andrew, where can you be found?
You can find me on Twitter at Capzilla06, as well as our YouTube channel, Chasing Labels.
And you can find me on Facebook at Stephen Billings. You can find me at the other Chasing Labels pages, whether it be our Twitter at Chasing Labels or our Facebook group. You go join and talk with us about a lot of stuff in there. We do polls for our other show, Unwatched Pile, so go in there and check that out. You can also follow me on Instagram at Chasing Labels Pod. You can find the audio for the podcast on Podbean, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, and other places. Thanks again for listening, and hey, keep on watching them movies.
I know I will.